Okay, fabulous. I'm gonna let everybody get settled here in the room with us before we officially get started. If you're joining us on Zoom, thank you, and we'll get started momentarily. All right. Okay, I think we're all set. Are we all set on Zoom, Madison?
Looks like it.
All right. Fabulous. All right, thanks everybody for joining us tonight. Those on Zoom, you can probably not see the extent of the room, but we have a full house here. So thanks everyone for joining us both in person and virtually on Zoom. All right, let's get to the next slide. There we go. All right, before we get started, today's meeting is a hybrid meeting. So again, that means we have people joining us here in person and on Zoom. Those joining us virtually, please make sure you keep yourself muted until we get to the public comment period. Public comment will be taken by those joining us in person and those joining us virtually. Those joining us virtually, you can message via the chat to the public comment participant. It is labeled as such, or use the raise hand feature once we get to public comment. We'll also take comments from those joining us here in the room, and we have comment cards on tables, on seats. They were as you came in. So if you're not comfortable speaking, but you would like to write down a comment, we'll collect those before we get to the public comment portion of the meeting. After today's meeting, if you want to, take those comment cards home, review your notes, and maybe submit some comments after the meeting today, you can do so by emailing assistant@villageofeggharbor.org. It's up on the screen here. It's also available via a fillable form on the State Highway 42 page of the village website. So if you were to visit that site after today, you could just fill out that form right on the website. This meeting is being recorded tonight. We will upload the meeting recording to the village website after tonight's meeting for reviewing by any of you that are joining us live or reviewing by those that were unable to attend. We will be having a presentation by our planning partners with Brave later on tonight. And any recommendations or any comments on their recommendations specifically, we will be taking until next Wednesday, January 25th. Which will allow Grave to review those comments and incorporate any comments into their final recommendation and summaries to our Parks and Public Works Committee and Village Board. So that's why there's a deadline on that, because they need time to review it before they finalize their proposal. All right, so our meeting agenda tonight, if you received the meeting information, you've likely seen this already. We're going to do a project review and an update on how our plans have changed. A lot of you did join us for our public meetings back in summer of 2021, so you'll get an update on what's changed since then. We have our project engineer joining us that will give us an engineering update and review the project timeline. We'll review updated renderings and videos, and as I mentioned, we have our planning partners here from Grave that will be reviewing some of their recommendations with us, specifically on the pedestrian zone and turn lane and traffic calming. Then we'll have public comment, and then we'll talk a little bit about next steps. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to John, who's over here. Yep.
Okay, thanks, Megan. So I'm John Heller, the village president. I would like to start. Oh, yeah.
By talking into the microphone.
Talking into the microphone and introduce our village team. So I'll start with the village staff, and that's Megan Sawyer, our village administrator, and Madison Coltier, our deputy administrator, who's back at the computer there. Village board members. We have Lisa Van Lannen. Lisa's right here. We have Cambria Miller. Cambria, where are you? Cambria is way back in the room. And we have Angela Lynch, who is right here. Our Parks and Public Works Committee. Pardon?
Ken.
Yeah, oh, I'm sorry, and Ken Tice. I'm sorry, Ken.
It's all right.
Yeah, I was gonna point you on for special consideration after we do this. Parks and Public Works Committee, that would be Lisa Van Lannen. I'm on the committee, Ed Conlon, who I don't believe is here. Karen Northrop, who's right here, and Don Helm, who I'm not sure is, I don't think he's here either. Our village consultants, Mike Simon with McMahon Engineering, Mary Kramer and Dominic Marlowe, who are our planners and urban designers with Great Design and Urban Planning. And then Tom Wolf, who is an arborist and a horticulturist, who's right there, who is very instrumental in doing the tree planting and other landscaping that will be incorporated into the plan. And Wisconsin Department of Transportation, Paul Brower, I don't know if he's here or not.
He's not attending.
He's not attending, okay. Next slide. Okay, the purpose of today's meeting. Update what's happened since the last meeting, which is approximately a year and a half ago. August of 01. 2 years, 21?
Yep.
21. So, and look at what's happened to the plans and show you what improvements have been made. Received consultant input on the core section concerning related to impervious surface, turn lane, and traffic calming. And then at the end of the meeting, received public comments and any questions. And again, I'd like to reiterate that no decisions are going to be made immediately or as a result of this meeting. A lot of the input will be digested and will be incorporated into whatever happens in the final design. Next, please.
The leg.
So where are we? Well, so we're putting the finishing touches on the overall plan and finalizing the project plan. What we'll do is review the plans approved by the village, and we're going to be taking comment, and that will affect, as I said, the final design. Changes and enhancements to plan as presented today need village board of approval, so it goes to the plan commission and then it goes to the trustees as a whole. Pardon?
Parks and Public Works.
Parks and Public Works. And then again, no decisions made tonight. Be careful, but careful consideration will be reviewed after tonight's public meeting. Next.
There we go.
So the project overview. The project basically consists of 3 parts: the TAP project, South TAP, North TAP, and the core project. So we'll start on the south side and discuss the South TAP project and move to the core, and then move up to the North TAP project. What does that consist of? Well, do you want to go to the next slide, Megan? So what the TAP project consists of is putting in bike lanes, putting in curb and gutter, putting in grass terraces, and putting in sidewalk, and putting in lighting. So what you see here is basically the design for the North and the South TAP sections. Next. In the core project, things change a little bit. We have a 5-foot sidewalk on both sides of the highway, a 5-foot paved terrace between the sidewalk and back of curb, with brick accents along the curb. 8-foot parking lanes, bike accommodations, 3 dedicated left turn lanes, northbound, one at County Highway G and one at White Cliff, southbound at the Main Street shops. As was proposed at our last public meeting, the utilities will be buried. And at Highway E, between 42 and Church Street, we will be putting in curb and gutter on both sides of the street and sidewalks on the south side of the street. We'll also be reconfiguring Birchwood Center parking lot to maximize parking. Next. That brings us to the north tab project. And again, it's the same thing that we saw on the south tab. 2 drive lanes, bike lanes, curb and gutter, both sides. Landscaping terrace and sidewalks and lightings on both sides of the street. So that's basically it. So I'll turn the podium back to Megan.
All right, we are going to be sharing a virtual rendering of the core project with you all tonight, and then some still renderings of the core project as well. I just want to point out a couple notes in terms of those renderings. If you're joining us here in person, a lot of the still renderings are on display on the east edge of the building here. So the video and still shot renderings are virtual renderings of the core project based on drone footage that we took back a few years ago. So the real time drone footage has some discrepancies as things have changed since a few years ago in the village. Pedestrian rest areas shown in the video are suggested locations. Those locations are located outside of the right of way, so we will have to work with individual property owners on the placement of those. So they're just being shown as suggested locations in the renderings you're going to see. The accent trees and ground plantings do need to comply with Wisconsin DOT line of sight guidelines. So there could be some modifications made to those specific species. And we do have some finalization to do in terms of the tree grade selection. As you'll see in the video, the paver brick pattern is diagonal. This is a software limitation with the software that was used to make these renderings. So in reality, the paver bricks will be end to end, just in a straight line versus being diagonal. The tree species is also a software limitation. So you will see trees incorporated into the renderings. They're not the exact species that we'll be reviewing later on in the presentation. And there could be some additional planting areas and or planters that either supplement the in-ground plantings or take the place of the in-ground plantings that you're going to see in the video. If you are joining us virtually, because we're screen sharing, there could be a lag time in the video, just to give you all heads up. The videos are posted on the State Highway 42 page of the village website. So if you don't have the best image, you can go there after the meeting to review them. So with that, I will play the video for you all. Just going to provide a little bit of narration here so you're all with us. This is the existing condition of State Highway 42. And as we transition here shortly, It will be an animated rendition of what is to be proposed. All right, I'm just gonna take a moment. If you joined us virtually, if you maybe have joined the meeting late, if you would like to submit comments, please submit comments to the public comment participant, not the Crest Pavilion Zoom chat. Public comment participant, that is the one that is being monitored by staff. All right, as we move on, I'm just gonna take a moment to review the history of the project planning. The State Highway 42 project has been in the works on paper for the last 8 years. A lot of discussions took place by the village in other planning processes specific to downtown planning and our bike and ped plan that happened prior to 2015. But plans have existed on paper since 2015. So that's where we're going to start the review of our timeline today. In 2015, the village began their project planning in partnership with both Smith Group, JJR, and McMahon. A design charrette meeting or a series of meetings is held to determine the direction of the State Highway 42 project. As a result of those meetings, traffic counts were conducted that resulted in warrants for both a traffic signal at the County Highway G intersection and turn lanes throughout the corridor. After those design charrette meetings, the village selects a design that incorporates a 10-foot shared use path on the east side of the roadway. And those plans are then developed and submitted to the DOT for their review. In 2016, the DOT has completed their review of those plans, which resulted in several changes needing to be made to those plans as developed, which included increasing the travel lane widths, removing artistic elements and commercial activity from the right of way. The village held public meetings on those plans that were developed after the 2015 design charrettes in partnership with SEH Inc. and McMahon. And those meetings result in public concern related to that shared use path that was incorporated into plans. And the village also at this point begins planning on additional capital improvement projects. In 2017, the State Highway 42 project is put on hold. Original construction for the project was slated for 2016. So that didn't happen in 2016, and in 2017, the village decided to put the project on hold in order to address public concerns raised at the 2016 public meeting around that shared use path. The village also begins to explore grant funding, and the planning for the sidewalk extension project begins. The village investigates dedicated on-street bike lane option instead of the shared use path option via the feedback from those public meetings in 2016. In 2018, the village pursues a grant funding. Traffic counts are completed in order to provide data and support for that grant funding. And the village at this point also decides to pair our project with the Wisconsin DOT mill and resurface project in order to reduce village-related project costs. And the village continues planning for the project in full swing. All right, picking up in 2019, the village formally decides to eliminate the shared use path design and incorporate on-street bike lanes. The village partners with McMahon to develop a 3D animation for the project, and committee members visit other municipalities to review their completed projects. In 2020, the committee reviews concerns related to the turn lane and looks at options to increase parking throughout the project. At this point, the on-street bike lanes are eliminated and bike accommodations are incorporated into the plans instead. And at this point, the village is awarded a $1.382 million transportation alternative program grant for the north and south sidewalk extension project. In 2021, the village reviewed various options for utilities, decided to table that decision until the public meetings were held. Those public meetings were held in August of 21. And after those public meetings, after great support for burial of the utilities, utility burial was incorporated formally by the village board into the project plans. 2022, we were caught by surprise by the dwarf like iris species that was flagged by the Wisconsin DNR as a potential threatened species to the project. As a result of that and some other factors, the village board did ultimately make the decision to delay project construction to 2023. Had we not done that, this project would currently be under construction today. So it was delayed for a year. The DNR did complete a plant survey, and it was verified that that plant would not be affected or that species would not be affected by the project. And the village also pursued some additional grant funding opportunities in 2022. One being the congestion mitigation and air quality grant, which we will review in more detail a little bit later. All right, so just to take a quick look at the project purpose and priorities. So there's an overarching purpose of the project to replace and enhance our infrastructure. We have deteriorating and aging infrastructure, so that's an overarching purpose. More specifically, the priorities for the project are to improve safety for motorists, pedestrians, and bicyclists, promote ease of walkability, improve multimodal connectivity throughout the village, improve access and ease of parking, as well as maintenance and maintaining the village aesthetic. All right, some key project elements related to safety. These include narrowing the roadway to the minimum allowable by the Wisconsin DOT, traffic calming measures, which we'll review in more detail in a moment, improve pedestrian crossings, additional turn lanes, and rerouting village core bicycle traffic to Church Street. Some more specific elements related to traffic calming, and again, include narrowing that roadway to the minimum allowable, street trees and planting areas, urbanizing the highway corridor, starting at South Trail on the south end and Church Street and Harbor Heights on the north end. So as you're coming into town, you're prompted by curb, gutter, sidewalk, street trees to know that you're coming into the village beyond the limits that exist today. Bump outs defining the entrance to the core and within the core, so that as you're entering village core, you have a visual cue that that corridor is narrowing up, so that you know that you need to slow down. Crosswalks with signs, and then after construction is complete, We will ask the DOT to conduct a speed study to analyze the speed limit. Speeds throughout the village continue to be a concern. Our main street is a state highway, which eliminates any authority we have over the speed limit. So we're hoping that these measures that we are putting in place will naturally slow speeds, therefore resulting in a speed study result that would then have the recommendation of lowering the speed limit throughout the village. Key project elements related to walkability. The sidewalks after construction will meet ADA accessibility standards. We'll have wider sidewalks to accommodate families and groups. Encroachments throughout the corridor will be removed, and we'll have street and tree plantings along the sidewalks. Key project elements related to connectivity. Sidewalks and bike lanes will be extended south to South Trail and north to Harbor Heights and Church Street to provide access to businesses and residences on either end of town. This is the two areas that the grant applies to. In the map shared on the screen, in that red highlighted area that indicates areas in which off-street pedestrian accommodations exist or will exist after construction of the State Highway 42 project. All right, key elements related to improving ease of parking and maintenance. There will be an increase in on-street parking spaces and improvements made to the Birchinger Center parking lot in order to maximize the parking spaces available in that lot. Parking spaces ingress and egress will be now at a 45-degree angle versus the 90 that exists today for ease of use, efficiency, and ease of snow removal. And that 45-degree angle, is, since it's more user friendly, there's less time to be driving over that curb, therefore resulting in curb damage. Taking a closer look at parking related to the project. There will be a net increase or net gain in parking when all is said and done. Looking at it in specific areas, from Harbor School to Market Street, 19 stalls exist today. There are 34 stalls proposed. Market Street to County Highway G, there are 19 stalls that exist today, 24 proposed. County Highway G to Orchard Road, there are 26 that exist today and 25 proposed. Orchard Road to County Highway E, there are 10 that exist today and 39 proposed. So if we look at the on-street totals only, existing today, there are 74, and as proposed, there are 122, including the Birchinger Center improvements that will be made. That lot, Birchinger Center specific, not including the post office side, has 21 dedicated spots that will be increased to 37. And then taking a look at all parking improvements related to the highway project, there's a net gain of 64 with 95 existing and 159 proposed. Also, in addition to the State Highway 42 project parking improvements, we have recently added 188 parking spaces on Church Street. All right, and lastly, key project elements related to maintaining the village aesthetic. Again, narrowing that roadway, lining streets with trees, both street trees and accent trees, adding planting areas, and providing pedestrian rest areas along the State Highway 42 corridor. Speaking of the trees lining the corridor, I'm going to pass it on to Ken and Tom to review the street tree.
Thank you, Megan. Hi, everyone.
I can't.
Good to see everybody. First, I'd like to introduce Tom. There you go. Good. Really happy to have Tom on board as our tree and a landscape consultant. Tom is an arborist and horticulturalist. He graduated from the University of Wisconsin-Madison with degrees in both of those areas. He had internships with the city of Milwaukee and Madison Forestry Departments. Then he spent 34 years as head gardener at the Art Institute of Chicago, which is what you see here. And I'd encourage you to look that up on Google Images sometime. It's just tremendous. But while he was there, he also did major installations at Notre Dame University, Chicago Symphony Orchestra Hall, Shed Aquarium, and he's owned his own business since then, consulting on plant healthcare. And an interesting fact about Tom, Jensen's great-grandson was an intern for Tom. Very cool. All right. So we brought Tom in to do three things for us. First, to work with property owners along Highway 42. Then work on the Highway 42, on the North Tap area. There were some major concerns up there about loss of trees. Then develop a Highway 42 street tree plan. And then when we get that under our belt, work on Church Street tree plan. So now I'd like to look at that updated cross section. So this is the North Tap area that was priority 1, I think starting in like no. Oh, okay, that. Yeah, I need some spinach. But I think it was August, September timeframe where some of the property owners up there came to us with some real concerns and fears about loss of trees in that area. And I can understand why those concerns were there. So first, I'd like to talk a little bit about this diagram to explain to everybody what area we're really talking about. So this is called a typical section or a cross section. And the key is down here. So we have a 12-foot travel lane. That's the, that along with the bike, but the 12-foot travel lane is the narrowest travel lane we can have. But then from the curb to the sidewalk, it's called the terrace. Then we have the sidewalk. Then we have this little area here where you got to blend the edge of the sidewalk to the ground along those properties. And that's called the slope intercept. And then when you get out of the slope intercept, there's something called a temporary limited easement area, which is where some construction equipment and people have to work in order to finish this slope intercept off, okay? So the concern was in the slope intercept and the temporary limited easement area, there's going to be some disruption. And so we embarked upon a priority project with Tom to really get down to specific facts. I think there was a lot of speculation initially about losing hundreds of trees and so forth, and of course that's really concerning. But we wanted to get down to the specific facts. So we had developed a team with Tom and Mike Simon, our engineer, John Hiller and myself. We got out there with tape measures. Got very, very detailed, examining a property by property basis. We had multiple days. We probably had at least 15 man days involved in that. We met with the owners. We identified trees that needed to be removed. We also surveyed the trees. And I mean survey, not just looking at the trees, that survey, but survey with a surveyor to get specific waypoints on those trees. We actually surveyed 157 trees that were of concern. These were trees that are formally marked and surveyed. If you drive north, you'll see some tape on the trees. The green tape represents or marks the trees that are going to be retained or saved, saving efforts. And the yellow, which isn't that far off of the green, but it's yellow if you look closer. Those are the trees that will have to be removed. So we surveyed 157 trees. 58 of those surveyed are marked to remove and 99 are marked to save. Well, this doesn't include all the woody shrubs and stuff that might be disrupted, in those areas. These are the actual trees. We also, Tom also identified trees that warrant pre-treatment and protection. And he's going to talk about this himself in a minute. I'm just setting it up for him. But an important note for all those property owners that our construction contract is actually going to provide that no trees shall be removed without the prior approval of the project engineer. So not only have we identified the trees and marked them safe, they're right on the plot. If the contractor has to move any trees or remove any trees, I should say, those have to get approval. So I think we've got a pretty tight button-up system for that. So I'd like to thank the property owners for working through this with us. It was, I think, a really positive experience. We met with some of those people multiple times. The feedback has been positive. You'll have to hear from them how they feel about it. But we're really happy to do that. It was great to have Tom's work. So now I'm going to turn it over to Tom. He's going to make some further comments about the North Tap section. And he's then going to segue into the design plan and the species selection for the overall Highway 42 project.
Hello. Okay, everybody hear me?
Yeah.
All right, so what we're gonna do when we looked at this north tap section. The first thing we had to do was identify the trees, see what we're working with here and see what's worth saving. And so we looked at the criteria of what's the health of the tree. After we identify the species, there's a lot of ash in there. We all know the emerald ash forest is storing ash up there. So we have about 37 to 40 ash trees that have to be removed. If they're not removed, they will become a nurse tree, and the emerald ash borer will then live in that and affect the other trees in the area that are healthy. So we looked at trees, whether they were worth saving, the benefit of saving them. Some were bug rubbed, some are volunteers. That means they were planted by themselves, and they're in clusters. They're on angles. They're going into other trees. And we just, is it worth saving at the cost benefit? So we marked all the trees that we are gonna try to protect, that could be protected with snow fence, physically protect them, or treat them, pre-treat them with a chemical that mitigates the damage from construction. It's called Canvastat. We've treated those trees. We treated approximately 428 inches of trees in the North Tap and some in the core. So that what it does is it slows down the top growth of the tree, or the crown growth of the tree, and encourages root growth. That's the part of the tree that's going to be affected by the construction. It shortens the inner node of the tree and puts the energy into the root system and makes the cuticle of the leaves thicker so that it can survive the disturbance, soil disturbance. We also talked about tree wells and to try to protect the trees that we're going to try to save. So we met with the property owners up there and walked through, did a little bit of discussion of once the construction starts, putting snow fence around them, pre-treatment, we did all that. So the trees that are coming out, the ash, there's an oak up in there, there's some arborvitae that are at angles. There's a lot of secondary canopy trees that are honeysuckle. They're invasive. There's honeysuckle in there. There's sumac, and there's some quite a bit of choke cherry in there. So that's how we decided what we were going to do to try to preserve the trees that were worth saving up in that North Tap. So then, once we finished that, we started talking about what we were going to plant in the taps and in the core. So the tree itself, number one criteria is urban tolerance. The tree isn't, you can't take a $50 tree and put it in a 50-cent hole, or the other way around. So what we want to do is we want trees that are going to survive the urban situation here, the compacted roots, the concrete, the reflected heat. The trees aren't genetically predisposed to be, no trees genetically predisposed to be dug from a nursery, bounced on a highway, and put in a hole. That doesn't work. It's not going to work. I mean, we don't want these trees to fail. We want them to thrive. Why do we want them to thrive? Because we want those huge crowns of the tree. That's so incredibly pleasing when you come into any site, go into any neighborhood. If it's an old neighborhood and the trees have been intact, that's incredibly impressive because of what they add to the environment. The biodiversity, their shelter for wildlife. They soften the hard surface. They improve the property values. The sense of place is tremendous if you have the trees there. So then we looked at what kind of trees we're going to put in and how many trees we were going to put in the North Tap, South Tap, and in the core. So approximately we have 52 trees in the core. We have 50 in the South Tap and 70 in the North Tap. what we did with the design is that the core, of course, is going to have trees that can survive the urban conditions. So this is a tree that it's out of Chicago Land Growth Series. This is a Morton Arboretum introduction, and this is a London plane tree. So it's a hybrid. It's crossed with the Western plane tree, our native plane tree. It's incredibly over top. Take compacted roots, you can take high pH, which we have here in Door County. That's a major problem, is the pH. This tree is aesthetically pleasing. It's got really interesting bark on it. It's got exfoliating bark. And this has been used and been observed for about 30 years, since 1994, in urban conditions. It's used in a river walk in Chicago. It's used in parks in Chicago, used in Milwaukee. It's at the University of Wisconsin Arboretum and Longnecker Horticultural Gardens. So this is a very good tree for urban conditions. It can survive drought. It's drought tolerant. It can stand flooding. And it's a riparian or a river bottom species. This tree is extremely hardy. It's got a massive root system, which we need because when you have a situation with a road like this, you have a wind tunnel. So we're going to have high winds coming through there, coming off the lake. So something that's survive it. It's hardy to our zone, the 5. We're in horticulture zone 5. The other tree I have is a Triumph elm. This is a cross. It's a hybrid American elm. This is about 98% resistant to Dutch elm disease. This is also a buttress root system, massive root system. So this tree has performed very well. It's been around for at least 40 years. It has the classic elm leaf, not the hybrid that are really small, like Siberian elm, that the classic elm fall coloration, ascending branches. It's got a beautiful crown, nice winter habit. Both these species have a nice winter habit. And then on the north and the south path, that's fine. That's an accent tree we're going to use in the core. That's an accent tree. This is the pink spire crabapple. It's got a very tight crown. It's got winter interest, 4-season winter interest. It flowers in the spring reliably every year. It's resistant to all the diseases that befall crab apples. It's got a beautiful persistent fruit display. And the fruit is then consumed by migrating birds once it's softened by the frost. Then it's great fall color. And it does have a nice winter hat. So now we have the north and south path. Now these trees are going to be in combination. This is the Ohio buckeye. This is the native buckeye, native to North America. So you've got a picture up in the corner here of some of the flowering, which attracts bees, attracts moths, attracts hummingbirds. Summer foliage is clean. It's kind of a glossy fall color. You can see right here, and it has a really nice winter habit. The other tree is a Sienna Glen Freeman maple. That's a cross between the silver maple and the red maple. So you've got the attributes of both. The silver maple is extremely firm and tough. That's what was used as a replacement tree for the American elm when the elm died out. They used silver maple in cities, but it takes a lot of maintenance. And so the cross with the red maple, which is a soft maple also, which has got the benefit of the quick growing. The structure, branch structure is very tough. And I use these 2 species because you're going to have utility wires. So the crowns are a little bit tighter. So you're not going to be involved. You don't want to have asphalt come in and prune your trees. Because we know what that looks like. Right. Okay, so these are the trees that we're using. And we don't have a plan. They're over here on the table. If you want to look at where you're laid out. First one is the core. That's going to be the Triumph elm and the sycamore or the plane tree. And the other 2 are the north and south path.
We're also on the website, Tom, for people joining us virtually.
I'm sorry.
We're on the website too, for people joining us virtually.
Yeah, these are all on the website. Okay, so when we planned it out, especially in the core, we had to place the trees where car doors wouldn't interfere with them when they open, so at the front of the car, but the middle, street lights were taken into consideration. And we're hopefully going to use tree grates, 4 by 8, because the more surface area you have, the more water can get into the tree. My last comment is gonna be on planting, which is the most important thing. Like I said, you got a $50 tree, you can't put it in a 50-cent hole. So what we're using is using Cornell University soil. That's engineered soil. There's years and years of research that's been done on this, especially in the major cities out east, Boston, Washington, DC. So this is CU soil is aggregate, large aggregate mixed with clay, and that goes under the paving areas, that go under the curbing, that would go under the sidewalk. And the tree roots can now grow into that. And the tree itself, the ball of the tree is going to go into mineral soil. That's the soil that's what people call dirt. That's the mineral soil. That's what we're calling. That's going to be a 3-foot diameter mineral soil, and there's going to be a 3-foot diameter of Cornell University soil. You can Google Cornell University soil. Nina Bassett from Cornell University has done a lot of work on this. So the tree has to be set correctly. So you have to have the area of rapid taper through the tree and go out in the woods. You see the tree coming down like this. So a little kid draws a picture of a tree, it's perfect. That area has to be above grade. That's very important. So the money you're spending on the tree, you want to get the tree. So 50 years from now, that tree is going to be massive. So the best time to plant a tree was 30 years ago. Second best time is, I don't know, when the sun comes up tomorrow morning. Yeah. So that's, and importance of the tree grades, I think I mentioned that, soil compaction area for people to move around the tree. And of course, going forward, you're gonna have to have insect control, pruning, and of course, watering is the most important to get the tree established.
Awesome. Thanks, Tom. Just one point that was on the notes that he didn't mention. We're going to lose some trees due to construction. In the existing core terrace, meaning between the curb and the sidewalk, we're going to lose 18 trees. Can't do anything about it. We're burying utilities. We're going to add 52, so we're going to be plus 34 in the core. And in the south tap, there's only 5 trees left in the terrace, in the south tap section, meaning south of Harbor School Road. A lot of trees in our terrace have already been removed because they're unhealthy. And a number of those trees that remain are unhealthy, right, Tom? They're stressed. Okay, the last point I'll make here, if I fell into my section, is our Lions Club Memorial. Here's a photo of it. You notice it was not in the video. This is a very important element to us. And we're going to take a look at how we can redesign Harborview Park and place this in a very prominent area. The problem is that when this road gets widened here, and this is part of the G right away, not the 42 right away, the curb is going to be very close to this wall, and it's not going to be very comfortable for anybody to sit right there. So we're going to take a look at this and redesign probably the south end of Harborview Park. I'm not saying it's going to be way down there, but we're going to take a look at that whole area and make sure it's prominently positioned. So our next step here is to finalize the ground plantings, finalize the grades, and confirm the line of sights and the engineering review on those X entries. All right. I think Mike, are you up next? Sure. All right, thank you.
I'm Mike Simon with McMahon. Go over the key aspects of this project and the whole design concepts that we have. The Highway 42 corridor experiences significant congestion in the summer tourism season. We took counts in 2015 and 2018 and kept an ADT of 13,000, 14,000 in that range, and it's just gone up since then, I'm sure. That's a lot of traffic in a 2-lane road with parking on both sides and minimal opportunities for turn lanes. So to address this congestion and the resulting degradation of air quality and the safety related to the congestion, village is taking a two-pronged approach to making improvements. The first is congestion mitigation by improving traffic flow and traffic operations in the corridor. This will involve making infrastructure improvements to the roadway. The second prong of the approach is the reduction in vehicle miles traveled. We are going to do that by improving bike and pedestrian combinations throughout the corridors as well as throughout the village. Really, the village has been very aggressive in striving towards meeting the goals of multimodal connectivity throughout. The Village of Egg Harbor is a green tier community. Wisconsin green tier community. The goal of the green tier community is to network to develop strategies to lead to a sustainable future. And a big part of that is transportation management. I mentioned degradation air quality in the previous slide. I'm sure how many people realize this, but Door County is one of 11 counties in the state of Wisconsin is a non-attainment area for federal pollutant standards, ozone and light particulates. So improving air quality is a real thing. So the strategy, the green tier strategy to reduce greenhouse emissions and vehicle miles traveled is to, like we mentioned previously, is to make improvements to the infrastructure, improve traffic flow, to reduce, and then as well as to reduce vehicle miles traveled by making improvements to the multimodal connectivity throughout the first prong that we talked about, traffic flow and traffic operation improvements. 6 key steps to this, and we'll be going through these in a little more detail in each.
Okay, sorry.
So the 3 main ones are the intersections of Main Street Shops, White Cliff Road, and G, pedestrian crossing improvements throughout the corridor, improvements at the 42 intersection with Orchard Road, and parking improvements. The first slide here is of the Main Street Shops intersection. Main Street Shops is right here. This is White Cliff Road. The intent is to back up here. Currently the way the project is set up, it's a 2-lane road. So if you're going through or turning left, you're doing it all from the same travel lane. So by adding a left turn lane, you create the opportunity for these vehicles to pull safely out of the through lanes of traffic and help prevent the traffic queues that are queuing behind it. I've seen traffic queues routinely in the summertime with 600 feet backing all the way up to Orchard on that approach. And the person who was out there doing the traffic counts noted that it was throughout the day when he was there. And these counts are done in July and August, so they're really the peak times, but just to give you some idea of what issues that exist out there right now. We will be moving parking in the areas that are shown in yellow. Parking will be moved to kind of reduce congestion. In a congested area like this, a lot of pedestrians, a lot of turning movements and through movements. You can imagine what adding a vehicle in there, trying to parallel park, moving in and out of parking stalls. By removing those from that turn lane area and adding additional stalls further away will improve traffic flow in this area. Another key element of this location is the improvement of sight distance. There's a curve as you're approaching this from going from south to north, and we'll see that in a little bit here. That really restricts sight lines. As you're waiting here in this left turn lane, Megan and I just did a practice run on it again today. You really have little time watching vehicles coming around that curve, be able to see where they're coming. There's an building encroachment at that location that the village is working with the property owner to remove a portion of it to help improve those sight lines and provide us the room to make our improvements. Intersection of White Cliff Road, you can see we're just coming out of the turn here. That curve that I mentioned previously, same improvements. Move traffic into a separate lane so it can wait to make the left-hand turn, which reduces the traffic queues. The traffic queue is backing up, but it's occurring the most significant areas to the north from the Main Street Shops. By traffic blocking southbound traffic, these left turns on the White Cliff Road have an easier time of doing it because of traffic is blocked to the north. But it is meets the warrants for a left turn lane, and that's what we're pursuing here. And the removal of the previous encroachment. This is the building we talked about. This drawing shows it without the porch that's on there right now. Okay, here you can really see where the curve is coming out of G. You can see when you're up in here, it's very hard to see as you're coming around the bend. So the turn lanes are out there right now. We're maintaining the same left turns and right turns at this intersection. We're removing some parking immediately adjacent to the intersection with G. That's right in here. There's a few stalls that are coming out. These stalls will make it hard for vehicles coming out of G to make a right or left-hand turn. It just, the sight lines are blocked by the turning vehicle. So we're removing those to improve the intersection sight distance. Pedestrian crossing improvements. Looking to improve signing and pavement marking throughout the corridor to heighten the awareness of vehicles that there are pedestrians in the street. Currently, there's a lot of jaywalking in this area of the corridor. So we're trying to get them concentrated at a protected pedestrian crossing. What we're showing here, excuse me, is the crossing that exists today at G. This is kind of this was part of the overall concept for improving traffic flow on the corridor, is to provide this crosswalk with the pedestrian refuge island out in the middle here. Previously, if you remember, vehicles, cars were stopping. Let's see, the pedestrian crossing was right in here. So it was very difficult for a car hanging on left off of 42 to see pedestrians crossing the road at that location. So now they're out in front where they should be, current standards, and so they're much more visible for vehicles out the roadway. Intersection of 42 with Orchard Road. Currently, there's an entrance to the Village Hall off of 42. It was designed to be the primary entrance. All the parking stalls right now are at 45-degree angles as you're coming out from 42. That intersection, that driveway is very close to intersection with Orchard. It's within 100 feet, which causes some confusion. If you're waiting to turn left from Orchard on to 42, someone's signaling right, you don't know if they're going to turn on Orchard or they're turning on into the Village Hall. Same if you're on 42 itself. If you're following a car, they're signaling right. If they don't signal prior to Orchard, they signal before you. Doesn't give you much time. There's only 100 feet to deal with there. So that's the improvement we're looking at there. Parking, and Megan mentioned parking previously. By improving parking, make it easier for cars to get in and out of the stalls. Currently, there's a bump out at every driveway pretty much throughout, and there's not, and stalls are at 90 degrees. So it's difficult to get in and out of those stalls. So the idea is to make it easier for cars to get in and out of the stalls, so they're not, trying to jockey their way into their stall while people are waiting on 42 to get by. In addition, by removing the bump outs at the driveways, those end stalls can be accessed without having to go through a bump out, which they currently do. So by removing the bump outs, it also provides us more space on 42 to add parking. And parking is added as part of this project and as part of the Church Street project to allow people to park in places other than 42, where it's less congested. For example, version of your center is being reconfigured, as Megan mentioned. We're also adding parking on E as part of the project on the south side of E, and then the parking that was added on Church and at the parking lot on Church. So those two parking. Pedestrian improvements. Obvious pedestrian improvements in the tap section, as there are no pedestrian facilities right now, except at the very south end of the north tap and north end of the south end. So we'll be adding sidewalk throughout, ADA compatible sidewalk. In the core, the existing pedestrian facilities are asphalt paths, they're aged, they're narrow, they don't meet ADA standards. If there is a lot of places, there isn't a terrace, or there is, it's kind of minimal. So we're constructing a new concrete sidewalk being ADA compliant with a consistent 5-foot terrace throughout that keeps the pedestrians using a buffer between light travel lanes and parking lanes. And also, when you open up your car doors, you're not opening up to into the sidewalk. There'll be paved surface to the back and curb in the core areas. That'll allow people, when they get out of their car, they're stepping onto a paved surface. It's easier to maintain in the wintertime as well, as far as moving snow. Installing a continuous energy efficient lighting system, improve safety, encourage more use of the sidewalk. People feel more comfortable when they're walking through a lighted sidewalk area versus walking through a totally unlit corridor. Then the pedestrian improvements on Harbor School, the existing facilities at Orchard and on Market provide links to the parking on Church Street. Bicycle improvements, again, no bike facilities in the tap section. We're adding on-street bike lanes throughout. We're adding a bike lane on County Street E as well. That'll provide a continuous link for bike traffic via bike lanes. So you're coming from north to south, you're coming down toward on 42 in a bike lane, you hang a left onto Punisher Coyote on the bike lanes, right on the Church, right on the Harbor School, and then back on the new bike lanes on the South Tap section. So continuous north-south route through the village. And another point on here is that we'll be adding some Wayfair signing on the Church Street, trying to direct people to the stores on the main corridor from Church Street. And this is just a drawing of the improvements that we talked about. So pretty much everywhere on this map, you've got bike lanes, you've got sidewalk, and you've got street lighting all the way through.
There we go.
Okay, we had a meeting in 2021 with some changes that happened to the plans over that time. The South Tap section was a big change. Originally, there was only sidewalk improvements on the west side of the road. The village made the decision to add them to the east side as well, down from Harbor School Road down to Ballpark Road. Ballpark Road is just a logical place to end it because there's an intersection there. Originally, for stormwater quality elements to the project, in the north and south part of the project, there are grass ditches that's considered by the DNR as a stormwater treatment facility. So when you fill in those ditches and add pavement and storm sewer, you have to be able to add some type of stormwater quality improvement. Originally, we were going to use biofilters to do that, but we're able to now make it work. So we're going to be adding catch basins that will need to be maintained by the village or annually to clean them out. But that's how our stormwater quality requirements are going to be met. The last plan sets at the last public meeting, the sidewalk is continuous sidewalk along the right of way. So the back walk was at the right of way throughout. That's been changed, so it's a consistent 5-foot terrace throughout. Even more consistent look to the village. And utility line burial areas that was discussed at the last meeting, but they're now shown on the plans on the roll plots that we have out there where utilities will be putting their above ground facilities. Okay, utilities in the core areas. The village approved in August 2021 to bury the utilities. So since that time, the village has been working with utilities to determine where their facilities have to be. They're going to have transformer bases, that type of thing, pedestal bases. They have to be above ground, and we're requiring permanent limited easements for those. That acquisition process started shortly. And then the utility construction itself will be occurring concurrently with work on the core. In addition to the utility work in the core, where the north and south tap will also have utility relocations. The existing power poles, they're kind of, a lot of them are going to be in the area of the sidewalk or in the terrace areas. We're planting trees in the terraces now, and we are putting street lighting all the way through. Those will be located at the back of the sidewalk. So their poles are gonna be relocated behind the sidewalk in existing right of way. The village has been talking to WPS, was the main utility on this project, about coming up with ways to help screen these above ground facilities. Transformer bases and pedestals are shown here, and it's a work in progress. Basically, you can't have anything right in front of their door, but they're willing to allow stuff around the sides, they're willing to work with property owners with reconfiguring the direction that the cabinets open up, so that maybe you can access from the driveway. So maybe you can screen the other sides that don't have the doors. Schedule for the TAP project. TAP project, as Megan mentioned, has got federal funding on it, so we have to follow a specific process through the DOT. Our PS&E, which is plan specification estimates, they're due in January. And by the end of this month, we need to make our initial submittal to the DOT. Anybody who lives in the TAP section knows you've been contacted about right-of-way acquisition. That acquisition time period will be up in February. The acquisition should be complete. And the village will authorize the project for Public Works and the village board to move forward and advertise for bids. Right now, it's scheduled to be let in May. That's because of the fiscal year that the project is in, May of 23, but the timeline for construction is still, I'll get into that a little bit, is 2024. Then the village would award the project in 2023. The core project, which is currently locally funded, 100% village funds. In August of 2023 is we anticipate having right of way complete. Again, it'll be starting in February and finishing up in August. Then the village will authorize the project to advertise bids, again, the Board of Public Works and the village board. Then in late August, early September, we'll be advertising and awarding bids, with the awards being in October. Construction timeline. The fall of 23 is when the utility person begin, the spring of 23, I'm sorry.
No, you're right.
You're already in this.
Utility area.
In the tap section,
Oh, sure.
yeah,
That's
in the
not-
tap section, that's not, the tap section, they're gonna start relocating their power poles in spring of this year. We've got a lot of work happening out on 42, not just on this project. So they'll be starting in spring of this year. And then in the fall of 23 is when they'll start their work in core bearing facilities. The village is being allowed to close Highway 42 starting in January through Memorial Day, the Friday Memorial Day weekend. The detour route provided, which I'll go over later. The project will consist in that part, in that time frame would be the new storm sewer, curb and gutter, asphalt pavement, temporary sidewalk, and temporary restoration. Trying to get something in place for the start of the tourism season after Memorial Day. The DOT has got a project in here too, which we'll discuss a little bit, and they'll be starting probably right after we wrap up. We need to have that curb and gutter in place so when they come through and do their mill and overlay project, which I'll discuss in a minute. Permanent sidewalk and street lighting will be starting in the fall of 24. We'll be finishing up street lighting and final restoration, final pavement mark at that time. And in the spring, due to lateness, it could be late when we're planting grass and all that. And our road control, that'll be touched up in the spring of 25. Okay, the DOT's mill and resurface project. The village has been working with the DOT throughout. They've had this plan to mill and resurface the two travel lanes on 42. Starting south of the village and extending to the north. Right now, their project is scheduled for 2024 spring bid letting, and they've been working with us. They haven't really set a construction plan yet. We're going to kind of keep coordinating them through all, but they've been good to work with. They've moved their let date a couple times as well. So this map shows the relationship of the DOT's project.
Something's there, yeah.
Rainbow Ridge at the south of the village, and it goes all the way up to Bluff Road in the town of Gibraltar. And then the village's project is shown in red. So their project is much bigger than just milling and resurfacing of the village. Okay, methods the village is using. Steps we're taking to make construction least impactful and as less impactful as possible to area residents. It's restricting the construction less than 3 months of the year should have less impact on business. Timing of Church Street was such that we could get that road done, have that parking in place for the time we close Highway 42 to provide alternate parking while construction is going on. So when 42 is being reconstructed, that on-street parking will not be able to be utilized when their construction is taking place. So that's one of the major benefits of additional parking in church. We reconstructed G a couple of years ago. That'll improve access from the west side of the road to the downtown. It gives another alternative route that people can get to and from the village core. The village will be working with the area businesses. That there's going to be an additional meeting later on once we get these timelines more nailed down to come up with specific dates and specific plans of how we're going to address access to businesses, both vehicle and pedestrian access during construction. The road will be closed when the village's work is going on. This will expedite the project as opposed to trying to get it constructed in stages with under traffic. And there'll be provisions in the contract after working with property owners and the businesses that we included in the contract, requiring the contract to maintain vehicle access and pedestrian access at all times. And then the village will also be coordinating with the post office for mail delivery. There'll be temporary mailboxes set up so the mail delivery can be maintained. Here's the map of the official detour route. Since it's Highway 42 or detouring, it needs to be on the detour needs to be on either a state road or a county road. So the official detour route will be Highway I to 57 to A and back over to E. Now that's the for through traffic. Access will be maintained on local access will be maintained throughout, so you can get into the village. The idea is if you don't have business in the village, you have an opportunity to drive around. So the intent is everyone in the village is not going to be riding this route. If you live in the area, you know the roads, you know how to get to and from. So it's an official route that has to be marked for Highway 42. There are 2 additional federal funding opportunities for the village that will fit in with the 2024 construction year. The construction is not going to change. The congestion mitigation air quality, the CMAQ funding. It's a funding program that's consistent with the village's green tier strategies that I pointed out earlier. The application was submitted for that in June. Projects were supposed to be selected in August of 22. They still have not been selected. Don't give a lot of hints on whether or not we're getting funding or not, but they said the village is under consideration is all they'll say. So the latest funding deadline is February of 2023. In addition, there is additional transportation alternative project funds available. These are all through the bipartisan infrastructure law, BIL. I'm sure you've heard of that in the news. That's the same funding that is being used for the north and south half sections on 42. Then it could be applied to the core. So these funding opportunities are for the core. Everything's set for funding in the TAP section. Application for that funding is in March of 23. It's only for projects that are being built in 2024, and they're focusing on communities of under 5,000. So I think hopefully they gives us a good shot at that. This is
Street view.
okay. This is a second video. This is the street view. So you're coming down low. Before we had the overhead view, now you're looking at it from the street. What was music?
Yeah, I don't know if it plays. There was music on this one. Was it? Yeah. It might just be because like a house system.
Okay.
and at the end.
So the intent was not to sit here in silence. So
Yeah, sorry. This one's quicker.
This is correlation even?
Yeah.
I think it, oh, frames, yeah.
see all the bump outs have been removed from the driveways. Areas that are marked yellow for no parking, a lot of that's what pretty much exists out there today. Coming up to the turn lane on Highway G. Still renderings that have been throughout the presentation as well as on the wall, all came from this. They're just cut right from the same model. New left turn lane for northbound onto White Cliff Road. See the tree wells for the trees that Ken was mentioning, those that haven't been officially, the sod hasn't been officially picked out yet. Just went by a pedestrian rest area. I don't know if it's,
I
next
think
one.
there's another one at the very
All
end.
right. So right here's the pedestrian rest area that's shown on the roll-ups as well. Just area where some benches, waste receptacles, a planter. That's set back on private property as well. If we're talking to property owners about, just to keep that the walk corridor open instead of having a bench in the corridor. The planters on the street lights, those are going to be maintained. You can see the just an example of transformer base with some possible screening around it.
Share the screen. Or I think you're- Or you can share the screen on your.
No, we're just
gonna-
using it for
yeah.
now, so that's okay.
I can wear heels tonight. Good evening. It's so wonderful to see all the great, wonderful people of Egg Harbor here tonight and online. Clearly, there is a definite interest in improving and enhancing your wonderful village. My name is Mary Kramer. I am with Grafe. We are a planning, engineering, and architecture firm. I am located out of our Milwaukee office. We do have offices in many Midwest cities and two others within Wisconsin. My background is in urban planning and urban design, and my apologies for those of you who can't see me. I also, my professional experience, I've done a lot of work in transportation planning for all modes. And a lot of my work did did take place in Chicago, but now I am in Milwaukee, but I've also done a lot of work in terms of corridor planning and streetscape design in particular. I also have the unique perspective of being a property owner in Door County. I have been a seasonal visitor here my entire life, so I'm very familiar with, I don't own an Egg Harbor, but I'm very familiar with Door County and Highway 42. I'm gonna let Dominic Marlowe, my colleague, introduce himself quickly. I will run through the first half of our presentation, and I will let Dominic kind of dive into some more details about what we looked at and what we're recommending.
That's high differentials. Yeah, so hi, good to see everybody. My name is Dominic Marlowe. Like Mary said, my title is planner and urban designer at Grave. My background is in planning, architecture, and then city design. Primarily, I do a wide range of issues at Grave in my day-to-day, ranging from a lot of corridor and streetscape planning, particularly as it pertains to bike and pedestrian planning, as well as some transit planning, and a lot of post-industrial rehab and redevelopment kind of work, which is not relevant here. We're going to focus on the corridor and streetscaping today. Largely a lot of work around safety improvements, which is definitely going to be a major theme of what we're going to get into. And I'm excited to do so, but I'll hand it back to Mary.
Thank you, Dominic. I'm really gonna love it. And let's see if I can navigate two monitors and two slide downs at the same time. Okay, good. So there is a little bit of lag, so apologies to those who are joining us virtually. I'll do my best to take a quick break between slides. So Grave's agenda this evening, you've heard from a lot of experts. There's clearly been a lot of work for this particular project. We want to talk tonight about our scope as planning and urban design review. Project goals as we understand them. What's planned? You've heard some great ideas and some great elements and features that are part of the plan. We'll quickly go through those, but I won't go through it exhaustively since we've heard a lot about it already. What else? Some other ideas that maybe haven't been considered or have been considered that we think warrant some additional thought. And then the meat of our conversation will be on 5 recommendations and an open comment period at the end. I should also note that tonight is about getting community feedback from all of you, listening to our presentation, what we have to offer in terms of recommendations, and getting feedback and comment from you. That period will be open for another week. We will continue to collect that information, and then our final document will then be presented to the village and village staff based on everything that's been collected. I knew I would have trouble navigating 2 screens.
There are two minutes. It's okay.
Okay, first our scope. Our instructions were pretty clear. The idea is to focus on the core. You've heard about those 3 segments, the 2 taps, the north and south, and then the core. And our focus was on urban design review and recommendations around the core, downtown core of the project. We were instructed to look at the streetscape and pedestrian zone outside the curb to curb area, the right of way, and safety and proposed also in addition to that, safety and proposed southbound turn lane north of White Cliff, which John will get into a little bit more detail a little bit later on, and overall general traffic calm conditions. Some background on the work that we've done. We were hired in November. We came in December, had a fabulous site visit, got tours of the village and of the main corridor of all 3 segments. We did walking tours, driving tours, and then, like you all heard tonight, got some great background on the project and its history, and learned a lot about the very wonderful layers that are involved with all of the public and community feedback that has happened so far. So a little background on planning and urban design and streetscape. Wanted to educate a little bit about urban design best practices. You'll see 3 kind of ingredients up there. defining local character, accommodating all forms of transportation, and maximizing economic, social, and environmental benefits. As planners and urban designers, it's not just about one mode, it's about considering all modes. So whether it be pedestrian, whether it be bicyclists, or whether it be vehicle traffic, we want to keep all of those in mind as we develop ideas and recommendations around the corridor. So it's a very holistic approach to designing roadways and designing commercial corridors. So the second piece of our analysis, the left turn lane assessment. The diagram you see on the left is a street on the left and a road on the right. What's in the middle is what is affectionately referred to as a strode. Our best practices and minimum goals for urban design are making sure we're meeting the minimum engineering requirements, ensuring adequate safety, again, for all modes, and maximizing the social, aesthetic, and environmental opportunities. So on the left it's become very clear to us that the Village of Egg Harbor very much desires to achieve what is happening on the left and avoid what is happening on the right. So it's about slowing traffic, putting people, bicyclists, and transit, maybe not necessarily in this case first, and focusing on the buildings, filling gaps, expanding the existing structures, and embracing complexity. And there's always complexity involved. And then finally, our approach to traffic calming. You'll see three equations there: high versus low speed, stressful versus predictable, and high versus low levels of activity. For that first, it's about creating friction and trying to reduce speeds, and making sure that there are elements within the plan that are addressing that. Creating predictable situations, and organizing the space for that level of predictability, and avoiding levels of stress, and creating high levels of activity, whether that through the environment itself, creating outdoor rooms, having space for people to come in, window shop, going in and out of shops, and then making sure that they are traveling through the corridor safely and stopping where they want to stop. So some project goals that we have learned and understood along our process: enhancing the quaint character. I think that's probably most important and very well understood. Highlighting a sense of arrival and communicating that character as you do enter the downtown core. Expanding and improving pedestrian zones. It's about strengthening linkages and connections to community landmarks and parks. We've gotten some feedback around softening the terrace and creating a welcome and comfortable environment, which in turn really does have positive environmental and stormwater management impacts. Slowing traffic and creating what Mike had described as part of the engineering, those 45-degree angled parking returns for on-street parking to ease getting in and out of parking spots. Consistency throughout the downtown, whether it be in materials, the materials palette, signage, furniture, and again, all of that creating a consistent palette. And it's very obvious a lot of that already exists. So it's building on that, enhancing it, and developing it beyond what's already here. So what's planned? Street redesign, burying utilities, brick terrace details, widening the sidewalk, traffic calming and narrowing of the roadway, street trees and landscaping, on-street parking reconfigurations, pedestrian rest areas, crosswalk additions, street light relocation. There are a lot of positive elements considered and planned as part of the current proposal, and clearly careful thought and consideration through this type of involvement, stakeholder and community involvement, and concerns went into the planning and development to date. And so some notable items to highlight that are already in the plan: burying utilities to eliminate visual clutter, brick terrace details, which breaks up the monotonous concrete sidewalk surface, widening the sidewalk to accommodate pedestrians and busy traffic, and really encourage growth outside the high tourism season. Traffic calming and narrowing the roadway at busy intersections with curb extensions, street trees and landscaping, which creates consistent and visually attractive environment all season long. On-street parking reconfiguration, pedestrian rest areas, crosswalks, and I did say I wasn't going to spend a lot of time on this, so I'm not. I'm going to move on to the next one, because I think you've heard and understand a lot about the elements that have already gone into it. So what else? This is a list of some additional items that we have considered as part of our recommendations and ideas. It was a little bit about building off of what's already there. Additional curb extensions, additional crosswalks, perhaps mid-block connections, removing unused and unsafe curb cuts, maybe reconsideration of low-impact pedestrian signage at particular locations where there are high volumes of traffic, urban design opportunities around site furniture, planting beds, additional planting pots, screening of the utility needs, path lighting at particular location, and then gateway signage and temporary public art. So this graphic, there's a lot of detail here. At the end of the meeting tonight, I would encourage all of you, there are all 6 of these boards reflected in the presentation are here. We also have some green stickers, so please put a sticker on an item that you think you like. But take a closer look, there's a lot more details and you'll be able to read a little bit more closely than on screen here. So this first one is some overall recommendations based on those 3 items, streetscape, traffic calming, and the left turn lane. There's, in terms of general streetscape, it talks about softening the terrace with flush planting beds to eliminate tripping hazards for pedestrians or people getting in and out of their cars. Signage and kiosks at 3 locations as you enter from the north and the south, and then somewhat of a central location, but perhaps near the post office and Village Hall.
Could you use the pointer, please?
Oh, sure,
Okay.
yes. Use some muscle with it. Okay, so signage kiosks are the blue asterisk here. So at the south end, the north end, and then perhaps at a more central location near the Main Street shops. Looking at potentially path lighting as you approach the curve and the wonderful view down to Lake Michigan. Public art and sculpture, opportunities perhaps on the back of the sidewalk. There could be opportunities for that up and down the corridor. And additional planter pots with the pink diamonds. Some additional suggestions around curb cut elimination. That's addressing both traffic calming and some suggestions around the left turn lane proposed north of White Cliff. Pedestrian beacon signage, I mentioned that, so that's also at these 2 particular locations that have high volumes of traffic, both pedestrian and vehicle, as well as what Mike had talked about in terms of that curve and view. So perhaps additional consideration around that type of a treatment and the type of activation for those beacon signage. And then I'll get into, we'll talk a little bit more detail about the southbound turn lane, but median striping and perhaps temporary removable bollards to enhance that safety for pedestrians as they are entering the crosswalk. I need 4 hands, not 2. Okay. Okay. So breaking into 3 pieces, recommendations specific to urban design. Additional planter pots were identified with the pink diamonds We located some additional key locations throughout the core of the corridor where we thought an additional planter pot to soften views or perhaps screen utilities. Maybe there's also an opportunity for additional pedestrian rest areas there. Could be located up and down the core of the corridor. Signage kiosks, as I mentioned, that alert you're here to visitors, you've entered the downtown core of Egg Harbor. I just mentioned pedestrian rest areas, additional locations at key points of interest. And again, I feel like many of these items, it's enhancing of what's already there. They've been addressed, they've been added, and our recommendations are there could be opportunity for some additional locations. Path lighting to highlight the park and the views of Lake Michigan, and the opportunity for art and sculpture. So I do want to mention that what we're also providing in much of our presentation some imagery and photographs from other communities that represent the elements that we're trying to convey. The conditions may not be exactly the way they are here in Egg Harbor in terms of the width of the terrace, the width of the sidewalk. But what we're trying to suggest or give a visual representation of are the individual elements themselves. So the image on the left is about having flush planters, different paving materials, and bump outs with a mid-block crosswalk. Path lighting, again at Harborview Park, possibly that's the center image. The bottom left is showing you the different types of paving treatments, whether it be a brick pattern or concrete sidewalk. The middle images at the bottom, again, some gateway signage reflective of a lighthouse design or other nautical feature or something specific to Egg Harbor. Additional planter pots on the left. And then perhaps in terms of public art and sculpture, the idea of a unique planter, like the boat image you're seeing here on the right in the center, or perhaps mosaic tiles. For some additional and detailed recommendations around the terrace, traffic calming, and the left turn lane, I'm going to turn over to Dominic. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm gonna dig into a couple of the details about some of our more specific recommendations that are not located on some of the symbols you saw on those overall maps. If you had trouble reading those overall maps, don't worry, the intention was more for you to look at them on the boards than it was onto the screen. But a couple of those things aren't at one location, but instead are ideas to maybe reconsider design of the entire stretch of the corridor on the terrace. And so what you're looking here is two alternative concepts for how we think the brick pattern could be redesigned to enhance the character of what we see as the pedestrian zone of Egg Harbor and how that should really end up feeling. So what we've heard leading up to creating this design is that the proposed just band of brick strips along the sidewalk is a little bit too linear. It can feel a little bit bleak. And we wanted to see if we can introduce some rhythm, break it up, a little bit more cadence to it, and reduce the sort of imposing nature of a singular line. There's some other challenges that we've heard along the way that we needed to address in figuring out an alternative design. We can't just add a whole bunch of turf because there are maintenance considerations with high pedestrian areas and the maintenance of turf just turning into trampled dirt, as well as there are several encroachments along the public way that kind of complicate the ability to have a consistent design of the sidewalk and the terrace along the entire distance. So at the same time, we have identified several positive elements in the proposed street design. One is, we're recommending to keep these additional trees close to the street to create that really impressive canopy that Tom was talking about that I think it's really going to be the most impressive change that is involved in the current proposed design. In addition to that, brick accents, we do believe add a lot of character. We want to build on that and improve it. So we kept it, just thought maybe we can rearrange it using more or less the same amount. And then the use of planters in the proposed design are generally at key locations such as corners, and we think they add a lot of softness and character to those corners. But between those corners, there aren't a lot of planters proposed, and so we wanted to look at additional opportunities to add some planters in there. So our recommended elements, first of all, don't make any changes to the dimensions of the plant. So the sidewalk remains the same width, the terrace remains the same with the travel lanes, the parking areas. None of that is changing in this specific design that I'm showing. But we want to reorient the brick pattern to break up the pavement rather than just accent it on the edge. And this can be done in either bands, which you're seeing on the right, or a pattern kind of alternating on the left. We had multiple ideas, we just couldn't hold back. We had to share them all with you guys. And we want to get your input. And there's certainly ways to approach this beyond this as well, but we didn't want to overwhelm. The second thing that we wanted to do is really to keep that 5-foot sidewalk to the back of the right of way consistently. So that was one of the changes that Mike actually talked about having more recently in 2021, was to take that sidewalk away from the back of the right of way and make it a more consistent terrace. And we think that the opposite and going back to that back of the right of way should be reconsidered. In order to provide some of these opportunities, we've identified to fill the terrace up with some more life and softness. And if we can keep consistent sidewalk to the back of the curb, we can have a consistent space for the terrace in order to do things like adding the planter beds, but also things like movable furniture and planter pots to add some more eye-level street greenery and potentially some movable public art. So unfortunately, you can't bolt public art or bolt anything on the sidewalk on a highway due to road standards, but movable things and temporary things are certainly allowed, and there are opportunities to explore that on the corridor. In terms of what sort of movable things can be placed in the terrace area, if this is pursued further and supported, we would draft up a set of guidelines for what is sort of acceptable to place in that terrace area, and then what would not be acceptable, so that there would be a level of predictability, but that property owners and businesses could sort of use that terrace space, not the back of the sidewalk, but just the terrace area as an opportunity to sort of add some life and activity to that area. And so those guidelines could include things like what materials are acceptable, what size of things, what height of things are all acceptable. And we would work with the village to refine those guidelines, and those could continue to be improved beyond the lifespan of this planning period for this project. And then as well as if an alternative to the terrace is desired by the village, we can work out some of the kinks about how this would work when it approaches a corner, when it approaches a driveway, and sort of all of those sort of edge cases where it happens, but it's not just a straight perfect line as no roads actually are. So the second thing I wanted to address was that we were asked to review the left turn lane and any safety concerns we might have had regarding the left turn lane. So I've designed several streets for improved safety, especially as it comes to turn lane improvements. Oftentimes, while turn lanes are merited on a street or warranted on a street, as we use engineering terminology, there are still additional considerations for pedestrians and cyclists and everybody and all other users besides cars that can be made to improve the area that we apply to several of our projects. There are generally a lot of things that turn lanes do to improve safety, especially in terms of improving vehicle safety. Turn lanes do a really good job, as I understand from our engineers, of preventing rear-ending incidents and in general, making the roads more predictable for drivers and making giving everybody sort of space for different actions rather than panicking to make a turn quickly because you're trying to get between a gap in cars, and because you panicked, you didn't see a pedestrian at night, right? On the other hand, increasing the crossing distance of a roadway also decreases safety for pedestrians. So when we're looking at any sort of lane addition, whether it's a turn lane or a travel lane addition, we want to be looking at what can we do to improve the safety of that, because of the fact that any increased distance is generally going to decrease safety for pedestrians. But there's a couple other things that we like about the turn lane that we want to at least acknowledge as a benefit to the overall design. Mary touched on this earlier, and the fact that a turn lane also creates a lower stress environment, at least during traffic periods. There's also a potential speed reduction from the narrowing and curving of the roadway. So if we look at that, if we look here, there's sort of the wider area where the parking is in the proposed roadway, then it narrows up right before the turn lane and then kind of widens again. So this sort of narrowing and then turning movement almost acts like a chicane, which it is known to have the effect of slowing traffic because you're making movements around it and you're sort of trying to avoid obstacles. Yeah, so wanted to acknowledge all those pros about the design, and then share in general, how do I approach trying to continue to improve safety? So I'm generally trying to lower stress and increase predictability. I'm trying to increase friction, which Mary also talked about. Friction is anything that can propose a potential hazard for a driver or pedestrian, so that they're more alert and more willing to slow down and be very careful while doing this. So I'm always looking for opportunities to increase friction in a safe way. And I'm also looking to narrow roadways as much as possible because narrower roadways reduce speed. That third one has been done to the maximum extent possible by DOT standards. And the turn lane generally does all of these things, but we have a couple recommendations to explore further in order to see if we can further achieve those goals. One would be to mark off the turn lane with stripes, what you see sort of in that example image and then right here, to create what is known as a pedestrian refuge island. So that one would protect the pedestrian crossing, but two, it has the effect of ensuring that the turn lane is only used to access the Main Street shops and not this private driveway. The reason for that is even if it's intended to only be used for the Main Street shops, there may be a difference between what pedestrians understand the turn lane is supposed to be used for and what drivers understand. So what a pedestrian may perceive as a safe crossing may not be perceived as by a driver as a need to stop, because they understand that turn lane is to be used for that private driveway, because turn lanes typically approach intersections and not private driveways. They're often used for private driveways as well, but when doing so, they typically have some sort of additional safety element that can be introduced. Because we think that this turn lane should only be used for the Main Street shops, stopping it beforehand and introducing opportunity for pedestrians is certainly an opportunity we recognize and think should be reviewed further by the engineers. We've shown one example, which is a temporary solution, painting and putting up temporary bollards. This is very commonly used for pilot studies to see if something works and is feasible. But there's also an opportunity to create a more attractive and permanent design where you add a curb around it, you actually protect it with the curb. It can be landscaped or just completely paved over, and create a more formal refuge island. And this would certainly be the safest solution, though once again, the feasibility of this needs to be reviewed. But it's a common solution that we would generally apply to most situations similar to this. We actually looked at this crosswalk and the one directly south of it for the crossing at Highway G. And while we weren't able to come up with any additional safety improvements in terms of the design of the crosswalk for that intersection, we're recommending pedestrian crossing signs that include what's called LED blinker signs, which are less intrusive or obtrusive than what's known as a rapid flashing beacon, which are sort of the big orange bars that flash back and forth when a pedestrian activates it. But these are just a little bit less intrusive, aren't visible from a long distance away, and still alert drivers that this is a higher pedestrian volume crossing this location, and you should be way more observant for pedestrians when navigating through this part of the area. And our third recommendation is to explore opportunities, whether it's during this road reconstruction or down the line, to eliminate this curb cut entirely, because generally we don't like when a curb cut is inside an intersection between crosswalks, because that just creates an added level of complexity. I've already discussed that level of complexity when I was talking about the drivers not being sure if they can use this turn lane to access that driveway or not. Yeah. So in addition to those specific recommendations, we have a sort of, this is a version of that earlier board you saw, but just showing traffic calming recommendations that have to do with pedestrian safety, such as crosswalks, the bump outs or curb extensions, those are interchangeable words. The striping of the median or the curbing of the median, all the curb cut eliminations. We've distinguished between the curb cuts that are already proposed to be eliminated in the design over on that table, and then a couple additional curb cuts that we've identified may be possible to close as well that are unused or maybe duplicative and redundant for a parking lot. We've also identified what curb extensions are already proposed versus what we're proposing. Yeah. Show this slide. So this is just a visualization of some of those larger images, but yeah, so essentially curb cuts have the opportunity. So curb cuts create additional points of conflict along our roadway and more areas to turn in and out. Anytime you can reduce those, reduces the point of conflict, which is a potential collision point. As well as curb extensions, which Mary showed earlier. Anytime you can bring something into the roadway that has the potential to narrow it. While several are being eliminated as part of the proposed plan, we're recommending that a couple either be brought back or introduced entirely new as an opportunity to further slow traffic. For the most part, the reintroduction of the curb extensions we're recommending would not eliminate any of the proposed parking. However, I think there's two spaces that would either need to be shifted or eliminated in order to accommodate ours. Those exist around Market Street for the ones I'm referring to. And then, yeah, just a larger image of these. I want to talk a little bit about this proposed sign. So there are a lot of ways to customize these signs. There are multiple designs of the shape. There's either this or the school crossing sort of house shape. The size of it can be customized. The activation type, it can either sense pedestrians automatically. It can have a button to be pressed for pedestrians. It can remain on at all times, which we're not recommending, but that's an option. And it can also be powered different ways. Since you're bearing utilities, you wouldn't need a solar panel on the top, but this is the image available by the distributor. But if you want a solar panel, you can go for it. I think the ones out here are pretty cool. So either way, you know, there are already signs produced, but whenever you have an especially high crossing, this is a way to increase pedestrian safety. If you don't want to do things like introduce a traffic signal, which we've heard is not desirable by the village. Yeah, absolutely. And with that, we welcome your participation on, you know, our boards, like Mary said, with the green dots, and just leave us some feedback that will be open for a week. And we'll be here to answer any questions about what we've discussed. And I'll hand it back to Mary or Meg.
All right, is this microphone also on? Yes, okay. Thank you to Dominic and Mary for your portion of the presentation. All right, now we're going to get into the public comment period, which Mary is not going to, no, you're good, to help us facilitate here. So like I said, we are going to take comments from those joining us in the room and virtually. Again, if you're joining us virtually, please provide comment to the public comment participant in the meeting. Let me get back to my slideshow here so I can get this info up.
Megan, can I ask you a quick question? Is the 12 feet, is that going to be throughout the core? Or obviously not with the turn lanes, but.
We'll get to that. Yeah, just let me finish up here. Okay, so before we get into public comment, just really quick, next step. So we're gonna go through public comments tonight. They can be submitted after the meeting to that assistant@villageofeggharbor.org or on the village website. After tonight's meeting, our planning partners at Grafe will finalize their recommendation and summarize the comments that were heard. We'll take those items for further consideration to Parks and Public Works and Village Board. They will review, discuss, and finalize the project plans at future meetings. Just as a note, all of our meetings are open to the public and contain open session elements, so public comment can be received. One final note before we start. Just want to point out that anything that we do in regard to this project, we do need to consult with the Wisconsin DOT on, as it is a state highway. So the elements that Grace reviewed with you today, we would need to consult with the Wisconsin DOT on incorporating any of those elements that they have been briefed, but they haven't had time to review. So we would need to receive approval from them on anything that the Grace team presented today. So just a point of note. Okay, so if you are joining us virtually and you want to provide comment, please either use the raise hand feature or chat with the public comment participant, not the Crest Pavilion account. That is not being monitored for public comment tonight. Let me get this slide up here, I'm sorry. Then we'll get started. If you have comment cards also, we will come around and collect those. We'll just stop sharing until I get this. All right, do we want to start with a public comment? Looks like we have one up front here. If you could state your name and if you're a village resident, please.
I'm Rich Wolf. I've been a village resident. We built the Lullaby Hotel back in 1953, so I've been around for a while. I just want to compliment the village on not only what you guys have done, but how you've gone about doing it to keep old guys like me safe. I made a number of notes. I said I'm a brick. I said keep it clean, keep it simple, keep it rural, keep it green. And be careful of what you do, putting down bricks simply to mark off the sidewalk, because we get a lot of snow, we gotta plow it, we gotta maintain it. And you go across a brick, you're gonna chip it up and we're gonna be, it's gonna cause a problem. Other than that, I'm very impressed. You're doing a heck of a lot better job than I could have done.
Hi, my name is David Sanks. I live up a block or so here from on Highway 42, and I just wanted to point out to many of you who are in the room that there are some elements of this project that some of us here believe need to be taken into deep consideration, and that is the impact this project has on the businesses and residents that live along State Highway 42. Not everyone who lives in that or has a business in it is looking at this having a negative impact. There is a great deal of people and organizations that do see that there are some negative impacts, and I would encourage the urban planning people as well as the village leadership to always keep in mind that what we want done in this village might be good on the overall for improving traffic flow, accessibility for tourists, and for people to get around. But let's also keep in mind that there are members of this community that have Highway 42 as their mainstay. And we also need to look at the impact that this project will have on those residences and businesses, some of which were allowed to establish their footprint without any indication from anyone that they either were in the right of way or causing a problem in the future that might develop because the right of way was either redefined or going to be defined at a time after construction had been done or things had been put in place. And I do know that the village leadership is very concerned about making sure certain things are taken into account and that there are adjustments that could be made. But this is not just from my perspective about the core, it's from Harbor Heights Road and County or Church Street all the way down to South Street. This project is not a three-tiered thing in my view. It's one project. It's got different elements to it. But for those of you who live on the off of Highway 42 or don't have businesses on Highway 42, please keep in mind the decisions that are made in this project are going to have some significant impact on some of
the businesses and residents that are located along Highway 42.
Madison, do we have a comment or question online?
Okay, do you want me to read from the emails that we got beforehand?
Why don't you start with those that are in the chat and then we can hit those other questions.
While the presentations from the village and Brave were happening, I got a couple. Okay, I had to figure out how to. Okay. So the first one I received was from Bridget Browning, and I apologize if I mispronounce anyone's name. But it said, I have a question about why this meeting is only waiting to make decisions about the project for the core portion, not the other two portions. I also wonder why the village view by your promotion is only the core portion. Although my property is included in the core portion at 7904 Highway 42, I am also in the North Tap section. Your video did not show my property even though I am included in the core portion. I was under the impression the consultants would access the whole village, not just the core. We all contribute to the village, but the core is given priority. I resent this attention to businesses. I feel you are not adhering to your plan goals as stated. Why is the entire connectivity area not all included in the study? And then she,
Okay, I think we got her point. Unless there's another comment or question.
there was more questions on the trees.
Okay, so let's address the first question first. So the village did choose not to go through the expense to have the video extend into this north and south tag areas. However, we do have the typical section renderings available for those areas, and we do have those sections included in our larger roll plots, which are here in the room with us and then available on the website. So the landscape portion of the project has been evaluated in all aspects, north, south, tap, and core. The Grave team responded to some specific citizen concerns that were brought up a few months ago to the village board. Those concerns related specifically to the village core, so that's why they were brought on to expand on those concerns specifically. She had a question on the trees.
How many years will it take to get the trees to the size they are portrayed in the animation?
Tom Wolf, that's a question for you.
How many years will it take to, what's the question? How many years will it take for the trees to get mature?
As depicted on the screen. As depicted in the video.
That's a good question. I'm gonna say under the right conditions. 25 to 30 years.
Okay, any additional comments or questions here in the room?
Dave Rosick, business owner in the village. Has any consideration been given to putting a roundabout at G and 42?
Yes. Mike Simon.
Yes, back in 2015, when we first started working on this project, we did a traffic signal warrant analysis at the intersection of G and 42. And it does meet the warrants for traffic signals, both for vehicles and for pedestrians. There are enough pedestrians alone to warrant a traffic signal in that location. So we did look at a roundabout as well, but with the area needed to construct a roundabout to current standards on the state trunk highway, there's just not enough room without taking out joint businesses. So that's what the village not want to do that. And they did not want to install signals because of, maybe mentioned earlier, the village is static that we're trying to maintain.
Looks like there was another.
Hey, Megan,
What is,
can I just ask Tom to follow up on that? Tom, could you explain about how tall will the trees be when we plant them? And how many feet per year do they grow? The street trees. And that might be a better way to answer the question.
All right, well, they're gonna be 3 inches in diameter, 3.5 inches, 2.5 inches to 3 inches in diameter when at time of installation. It's gonna take a good 5 years to tree establish. Tree will probably be, at that point, probably be somewhere between 15 and 18 feet at time of installation. And under the right conditions, well, the old saying in the nursery trade is the first year it sleeps, the second year it creeps, the third year it leaps. So we're gonna be real conservative and say anywhere from 8 inches to 12 inches a year under the right conditions. If we could have a horrible year of drought with incredibly high temperatures, we could have a really good growing season. There's all these variables I'm taking into consideration. We could have an insect infestation, gypsy moth, spotted lanternfly, Japanese beetle, all those have to be considered. I'm going to say after the tree's established, it will probably grow 8 inches to 12 inches a year. So take 5 years for establishment, and I'm gonna say like this 25 to 30 years before we get to a mature height. They don't stop growing, they're gonna continue growing. When they stop growing, that's when they cease to live. So we're gonna say the mature height is gonna be 30 feet.
And before we move on, if you have a comment card, maybe Mary or John, if you wouldn't mind walking around, if you just kind of hold it up. And we'll come around and pick those up. If you have a comment card, just kind of hold it up. All right, and then there's a comment over here.
People here, I have the property right across the street here, 7869. Unfortunately, it's going to require a retaining wall. My great grandpa didn't realize the road was going to be that close to his house when he built it 120 years ago. But with all that said, I understand we need the retaining wall. 2 questions, and perhaps you've already tagged my trees, Mike. I didn't even look at them when I came up this afternoon. Have you come to the conclusion whether the trees are going to be able to be saved when you put the wall up, or they may be tagged if they have a ribbon on? I didn't even look to see if they do or not.
The wall will be going through those trees, as I recall.
Gotta use a mic.
Well, the trees are not on the right of way. The trees are on private property. And I can testify that because I had to take one down, and the state highway department and the county highway department came out, they measured it, and they told me it was on my property, and it cost me $1,200 to get it taken down. So the retaining wall will not be on private property, according to what they've told me in the past.
Sure, and I should have pointed out before we started, but specific property concerns, would be happy to set up a one-on-one meeting with you to even meet on site and discuss more in detail. For specific property concerns, that's the route we're gonna go tonight. We want to keep this open to the general public questions, get those answered. So feel free to maybe talk to me after the meeting, or send me an email, give me a call, or walk across the street. We'll get something set
Yeah,
up.
okay, and the other question would be on line of vision. How close are the parking going to be, and is the tree going to be limiting vision coming out of the driveway?
Sure.
So I can talk to you later about that.
Tom or Mike, either of you, do you want to take? Oh.
Well, I don't want to take a lot of time, but as anybody knows, and you mentioned, during the summertime, the cars are lined up. I like to back in, but the people won't even let you back in. You're lucky they stop the traffic enough to let you drive in.
Sure.
And I have guests that come in that drive in, and it is just really difficult when you have a pickup truck or a large SUV. You just can't see if people are coming down the hill. So.
Do we want to talk about sightlines in general, maybe in regards to plantings in response to that question, or just handle it separately?
I'm taking more time than I should now, but I can either.
Sure.
Well, now that the general layout is established, we will be going back and just double check everything for intersection site distances, make sure those concerns are addressed. And that is part of the next step in the process.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. I'm here. Paul, is that your hand? All right.
Hi, I'm Paul Brophy. I'm a seasonal resident living in Point Beach. I want to thank everybody for hard work here, and especially Ken and Tice, who's carrying a lot of this weight of the children. I've got two worries about this. One is the sidewalks. I'm really, want to drill down on what we saw tonight from Rafe. My worry is, I get the goal of trying to make sure that the sidewalks are not too crowded. But if they're too empty, that's an equal worry for me. Think about walking down sidewalks that are wide and you're alone on them, or you're walking with a companion. It makes the town feel empty. It makes the town feel lonely. It makes it feel barren. Take a walk on Church Street. You'll get my feeling, all right? And so I hope we can find enough ways of making the sidewalks / terraces interesting enough. And if there's a few days a year where you gotta walk past somebody, that's okay, in my opinion. People do it everywhere, in cities and in towns. I just was walking through Cedarburg yesterday. They've got sidewalks that are about 5 feet wide with a 4-foot terrace. It's a very busy pedestrian, commercial area, works well. I hope we don't err on the side of sidewalks that are too wide and too barren, because I think most of the days of the year, as people walk down them, they will feel barren and lonely. The second worry is, and Mike, I have to defer to you, but I don't know where the line is between traffic calming and congestion. And the left-hand turn lane into the Main Street market shops, and the ability then of somebody to come down on the right-hand lane right through that crosswalk that Ray focused on, and the crosswalk onto G, feels like it's contradictory to the notion of traffic calming. It feels to me like it's going to be speeding up traffic, and in my view, endangering pedestrians at both of those crosswalks. And you know, let's be sure that we're not in a position where we don't solve what is considered a congestion problem by speeding up traffic and perhaps harming pedestrians in the process. I don't know where that boundary is. I'm not a traffic engineer. I'm sure you've looked at it, but I'm very worried about it because it feels like a speeding answer. And it's also a shame to lose some of the parkland, the Lions Memorial, in order to accommodate that. That seems to be a traffic calming approach as it is right now. So I hope both the consultants look at that. I hope the engineers look at both of those issues. Again, I know you look at them a lot, but I'm really worried about them. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Mary Riley. I also live in Point Beach. And in general, I have a concern that we're creating more concrete and impervious surfaces throughout the village. I know you said that there was a major emphasis on the environmental issues related to your review, but from what I heard tonight, and I certainly could be wrong because I'm trying to digest, as everybody is, a lot of information in a short period of time. It seems like net we've lost stormwater mitigation practices and opportunities. We're getting rid of bump outs, we're getting rid of plantings, we're getting, all of this stuff that catches runoff, which we don't want, finding its way down into the bay. And so, maybe somebody can address this, but I feel like we are taking a big step backwards on stormwater mitigation practices. And I am concerned that they have not played a central enough role in this whole project consideration.
What I thought I would do is just make a quick, emphasize some things that we were recommending as part of our ideas as well. I'm not sure they were necessarily reflected as clearly in the presentation, but do please come up to the boards. I'm sorry to keep repeating this. to look at the details, but as part of the landscape and street tree recommendations, we do feel like that because there is going to be positioned on-street parking and we're gonna know where those spots are, they're gonna be marked. There could be opportunity for additional planting beds within the terrace itself, not just the ones that are probably shown in the engineering drawings, but there could be that addition in the terrace itself beyond just paving. But we also think the division of materials, whether it be concrete or brick pavers or planters, raised planter pots or pedestrian rest areas or signage or lighting, all of that creates kind of a rhythm and cadence, which will help further enhance that pedestrian zone. And perhaps, maybe this is more in response to Paul's original comment, but it's about breaking up that space and creating rooms. That's something we feel is really important along the pedestrian zone, as we affectionately refer to it, along the core of the corridor. I think if additional planting beds were added as well or considered, that might also address some additional stormwater runoff and sustainability measures you had just referenced.
Yeah, we'll go to the gentleman right in front of me here next, but as we're kind of, if you don't mind walking the microphone back to him, I'm just gonna go. We did have a few questions emailed to us in advance of tonight's meeting. I'm just gonna mention one of those quickly. And driveway access during the project for those that live on Project Road. How are we handling that? Mike, would you care to speak on that? Driveway access, how are we maintaining access to driveways during construction? Yes.
The, during construction into the court and the tap, the contractor is gonna have to maintain access to the extent practical to each property vehicle access. There may be times, like this example for the south tap, the poor curb and gutter and sidewalk through your driveways, the concrete aprons, you're not gonna have access during those times. Try to work it out so the contractor has to allow you a space to park on the opposite side of the road when that's occurring. Also, we'll be utilizing what's called high release strength concrete, which is a faster cure time to minimize the time that you're gonna be out of your driveway, but there will be times where it's gonna be difficult. For businesses, we try to maintain access of some kind at all times. You can't either via the side street or what have you. But these are all things we'll be looking at more in depth. Or it's a little more tricky for businesses, but for the homes, we're making provisions. There's provisions in the contract that limit the amount of time you'll be out of your active driveway. And they will be required to notify you within 24 hours prior to any temporary closure of your driveway.
All right, so if you wanted to go ahead.
Good evening. My name is Chad Laddick, and me and my wife own Door County Facade. I don't know who to address this question to, maybe it's Dominic, but there was a picture on there about eliminating our driveway. So I don't know if that's something that I should put on a comment card, or can we explore that further? The reason for my question is, and I hope this isn't a sensitive subject to a lot of people, but I also own property in Sturgeon Bay, me and my wife, and we own all the property in front of culverts. So with that man that said over there about the process of building that turn lane and then having the back lane for people to go around, I would have to say I agree with him, because I'm to the point now with the police that they don't even clean up the car parks anymore. Because the people that are coming off, which would be my driveway, coming out onto 42 to go south, don't see the cars that are coming from the north. I can turn left out of my driveway.
Can't turn, the point was you could turn left out of the street shops.
But I don't have that driveway. My driveway is Door County Massage, but I want to say that I would be all for Dominic's idea. He touched on it very lightly, to eliminate our driveway. I don't know how to approach this or how to ask that question. But I think for safety's sake, I think it's a great idea. I mean, I don't know if they're voting or whatever. I'd be willing to set up the one-on-one. But I'm going to tell you right now that that thing that he was talking about is true. Because I literally live up on top of the hill and I watch car after car after car, think that they can sneak or they don't see the cars coming from the south going north, and they pull out, bam, they're crossed. So I think that's a huge safety concern. I don't know if you want me to come in one-on-one, I'd be happy to.
Yeah, I think, you know, obviously Dominic touched on that lightly because that elimination of that curb cut would need to be done in conjunction with the property owner. So we'd be definitely willing to hear more about your thoughts on that and seeing if we can make something work in that area, so. Yes, you're welcome. Jim? Oh, sorry, Mary.
Thanks. Jim Vanderhyde, and I just have a few observations today. First of all, I want to thank the village for making this happen. Given the crowd here, it sure seems like it was a good idea. I want to thank the great folks. I really think they brought some light to the balance between pedestrian and vehicle that we all sort of are trying to attain here. It's really easy when we talk about safety and air pollution and other things to lean on the side of the car, but none of this will be successful in my mind unless we create a vital downtown, make sure the businesses stay in business, and that the pedestrians have a great experience when they're here. So thanks for your comments. And there were a lot of really good things. I liked a lot of the comments about the trees and all the trees, the crosswalks, and the attention that you suggested that we focus on there. I think are really important. There's two things though that I think maybe we should be thinking about. One is the turn lane for the Main Street shops that everyone's been talking about. And maybe I'll build on Paul's comment about the sidewalks. You know, it's okay now and then for the sidewalks to get a little congested. In fact, it's a sign that there's some vitality and some energy in town. I take a very similar point of view on the traffic, that now and then on a busy day in the middle of summer, to have a little congestion in town is okay. And that turn lane seems to me to wipe out a lot of parking. And I guess I just want to make sure we pay attention to the businesses in that area. Make sure they can stay in business, otherwise there's no reason to come to Egg Harbor. So I think that's an important point in terms of the turn lane. And I think if there's a lot of curb cuts in downtown for private driveways and such, I think if we're going to begin to prioritize where we do a turn lane, it seems like we should do them perhaps, or at least consider them for public roads, but not for private driveways. I don't know where you start and stop that conversation if you start thinking about them for the many private drives that are in the court area. So that's one point. The other one, when we did the video or when we looked at the video for downtown, what really jumped out at me was the intersection of G and 42. That's our village square. I mean, it's got the village park there. It's got views of the water. It's a really important sort of center of our village. And it felt like there was way too much pavement. It seemed barren to me. I don't know if it was lack of trees or what, but the pavement gets very wide, a lot of sidewalks and roadway in there. And it seems to me that we really ought to focus on making that the heart of our village. And I don't know exactly what we do with that, but that might be a task for some of the planners. So those are my thoughts. Thank you.
All right, and then just a couple consolidated questions from emails we received prior to tonight's meeting and one of the comment cards in regards to tree planting in the downtown corridor, regarding tree maintenance. If the snow plowing and salt will have a negative impact on trees, and questioning if the maintenance will be taken care of by Public Works. Some of the maintenance that Tom had referred to, we would contract for insect control and things like that. Pruning potentially would be contracted. Other maintenance items related to the trees would be taken care of by Public Works. Tom, did you want to talk about the winter, the salt impact on trees and things like that, winter maintenance?
Right, so the question was about salt damage, salt that is overused in the urban situation. Both the trees that would be used in the core, that'd be the triumph elm and the exclamation London plane tree,
Both of them are riparian species, meaning they grow in a floodplain in their natural environment. In a floodplain, exactly, it's self-explanatory, it floods, and what's it flooded by? All the soil, the salts, not sodium chloride, but the other salts are coming in every year and they're flooding it. And those trees are standing in that, and they're very survivable in that situation. That's why years ago, before Dutch elm disease wiped out the American elm, they were used as a street tree because they are survivable in a salt situation. Further, you can apply gypsum. Gypsum absorbs or holds salt to itself. So if that's applied in the winter in the core area, in the above the planting bed, that would help to mitigate the problem with the salt. In the north and south tab, you're gonna have a terrace area that shouldn't be that much of a problem. You could also spread salt in that, gypsum above soil in the fall prior to that too. That should help mitigate any concerns with the salt.
Madison, do we have any questions from those joining us virtually that we have not already covered? All covered?
Yep, everything's covered.
Okay. Looks like Kathy in the rust color there.
Megan, there's, this is Lynn, Megan. There's some questions in the chat.
Okay, Lynn, just, we have a in-person speaker and then we'll take the questions in the chat. Madison is monitoring the chat. However,
Anything in the chat for me?
okay.
I'd like to chime in on the questions with regards to the turnoff lane for the Main Street markets there. I agree with you.
Sure. Okay, go ahead. If you could just identify yourself, please. State your
Okay.
name.
My name is Ron Mowerman. I'm a seasonal resident. And I agree with the people that are questioning the turn lane as far as whether that's going to be a problem for the pedestrians. I agree with the people that have said that sometimes the traffic does get backed up quite a ways. But if you give the people an opportunity to come by on the right-hand side as they're going south, I think that's going to create a lot of problems with respect to the pedestrians that are not paying attention to what's going on. If they have to keep that and feel that that's necessary, then I agree with Dominic's presentation with respect to having those flashing signs be available. And I think that those should be put in regardless for 4 locations. One of the main pedestrian areas for crossing is by Barrel 1. Then you've also got the one for the turn on to G, the Main Street Market one, and you've also got a lot of traffic pedestrian wise up by Casey's. That's all I've got to say. Like I say, I agree that the pedestrians is a concern because those little signs in the middle of the road that tell you have to give right away, they aren't going to be very good when you are having a person buried. Thank you.
Thank you. Kathy, if you don't mind, I'm just going to answer this question right on the screen here. We just had a couple of chats, so I opened them there. James Vopat has asked, will the buried utilities include fiber optic cable or the ability to add tech cable capability at a later date? In response to this question, outside of the State Highway 42 project, the village did earlier this year establish a broadband ad hoc committee to explore adding fiber optic cable to every property in the village of Egg Harbor. We are currently in the process of issuing a request for proposals to providers to have that done in the village. So that project is very much on the horizon. It's just a separate project outside of State Highway 42. Kathy, why don't you go ahead? I apologize, we were interrupted a bit.
My name is Kathy Novice, and I own Greens and Grains Natural Food
store on the corner of White Cliff Road and the highway. I also want to really thank the village for bringing in Grafe and for all the work that has been done prior. It's been years of work. And I'm very grateful that Grafe has been brought in to look at this project. Congestion. So I obviously have a huge issue with the third turn lane into the Main Street shops. Mary said that they were tasked with the safety of the southbound turn lane. And I was anticipating they would be looking at whether we should have a southbound turn lane, not whether it's safe only. I feel like doing traffic studies on Saturday in August and Saturday in July and building a highway based on the traffic on those 2 days. When we live here 12 months out of the year and it's not congested the other 10 or 8 months, and you're creating a wider roadway and eliminating 12 or 14 or 16 parking spaces in the heart of downtown where we have a horrible parking issue. Adding parking on the north end and on the south end and on Church Street is helpful, and we need more parking. But eliminating parking in the core of downtown where we have businesses that have 0 parking spaces. Plum Bottom has 0 parking spaces. Mezzanine has 0 parking spaces. Harborview Park has 0 parking spaces. And we're eliminating the only parking that is adjacent to that core of downtown. For me personally, Greens and Grains will go out of business if this plan is done. I cannot survive on the parking on White Cliff Road. It's impossible. Those 12 parking spaces on the highway between White Cliff Road and Parador are essential for my business to survive. So if this plan goes through as drawn, I can't visualize a way that I can stay in business. I don't know what the planners have come up with in terms of where are the UPS trucks going to park that are servicing downtown. If Plum Bottom needs to get a delivery, are you intending that they should park by Parador and take their little 2-wheel cart a block and a half down the road a few times to carry products to those of us that are in the core? And safety wise, the way it's designed right now, I think it's not safer. I think that the southbound traffic allowed to go to the right side of the cars that are turning, they're going to speed up. And if you're a pedestrian crossing from Chad's property toward my property, and you're in the pedestrian crossing when a car comes from the north, they cannot possibly see you if there are cars sitting in that left turn lane. I think the pedestrian issue will be much more dangerous putting in those 3 lanes. What's wrong with cars slowing down a bit? I mean, we have all of these statements saying we want traffic calming, we want cars to slow down, and then we create a situation to speed up traffic. Because that's what that 3rd lane is. It is simply, it's to prevent congestion, which congestion means traffic is slowing down. So why don't we just let cars stop for a minute? It gives an opportunity for pedestrians to cross the street if the southbound traffic is stopped. It gives an opportunity for people that are coming through the county to stop and look around and go, oh, look at that beautiful park. Look at the view from Harborview Park, instead of just streaming through town on their way to Fish Creek or Sister Bay. I am obviously deeply opposed to that southbound 3rd turn lane. It will create havoc for the businesses in that little section of downtown. A couple of other questions and comments. I think I really like the alternating paving in the terrace that Greg proposed as breaking up those terraces as we go through town. I think that's a better idea than the pavers going across the sidewalk whoever mentioned the snow plowing. When the snowplow tractor goes down, it'd be nice if that was all concrete. But if we break it up with those, what do you call them, rooms? Yeah, those rooms, I think that was a very lovely way to get rid of some of the paving. So question, those pavers, are they permeable or impermeable? What would be the proposal?
There'd be. My mic died.
Want mine? Sure, we'll share.
It's probably because this is the one we've been using.
Okay, the pavers would be impermeable, they'd be set on concrete, and that way they wouldn't settle over time. If you notice, the ones that are out there today have shifted quite a bit, so these would be set on concrete.
2, where would the additional crosswalks? Where are those additional crosswalks proposed? Because I think it's a really good idea. I think we need more crosswalks. People are constantly jaywalking.
Yeah, if you take a closer look at the boards that Graves has brought somewhere through here, but they will walk us through, and I'll change the batteries on this mic.
We can pull up this on screen.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's a bit of complexity in this. There are notes on the exhibit, which you are not supposed to be able to read right now. They are printed out over here in large enough font. So we identified every crosswalk that is proposed to be preserved in this sort of light peachy white rectangular color. The orange ones are new crosswalks we're proposing. And the orange dash ones, which is just this one right here, is a crosswalk that currently exists on the north end of Market Street, but is shown in a previous design as removed. We're not sure if that was an error or not, but we're recommending to preserve it. The only new crosswalks would be this one, which would actually be a mid-block crossing where the road narrows before the turn lane before the turn lane is introduced and tapers back to the narrowing. There's a curb extensions proposed, and since it's already so narrow at that location, we think an additional crosswalk there would help to continue the slow traffic and should be explored further.
Just as a point of reference, Tom, that's at the Cupola House property. Okay,
Yeah,
just want to make sure we all know.
That would be directly in front of Cupola House. And then there's also currently a crosswalk north of Orchard in front of Village Hall. It's set a little bit further north of the intersection than a crosswalk typically would be. This currently exists and is shown as removed. We're not sure if that's an error, but we're recommending that be preserved as well. And then I believe there's a crosswalk at the south end of the White Cliff intersection currently. That's shown as removed, and we are recommending that be considered. We think this one might be a bit of a stretch, given its location and the change in configuration, but we want to see if it's possible to preserve that one as well.
I just have
Sorry, there's one more.
one more also down here in front of the distillery. It's also would be considered mid-block. So one additional mid-block at the south end of the core and one additional at the north end or in front of Cupola House.
And that's because that's because we anticipate maybe a high level of pedestrian traffic and jaywalking from a resort to a high traffic destination of a distillery. And because there's such a strong distance between crosswalks on that block and mid-block, one might be very valuable there if it's possible. Good question.
The one other question I had on the video, they were showing bicyclists riding up and down the road, and there's no bike lane. And we've narrowed all the lanes to slow traffic down. And what is the anticipation of how we're going to deal with bikes?
Sure.
In the core?
Sure, so there's not formal bike lanes throughout the core, there's bike accommodations, so let's talk about what that means. So the travel lane, you ready to correct me if I'm wrong? Okay. The travel lane is 12 feet. Okay. There's an additional 3 feet of lane that is a bike accommodation. So the width of the lane is 15, the travel lane itself being 12, and 3 feet of accommodating bikes. Then you have your parking lane, your terrace, curb, terrace, sidewalk.
But no marketing for that.
No marking and bike accommodation. Nope, it is not a formal bike lane, so no marking.
Can they ride their bikes down
They can ride their bikes in the lane. Yes, yes. I had Kathy, that was all the questions you had? Okay. One additional or two additional questions we had that were submitted via email in advance of tonight's meeting. Construction times, are they limited by day and days of the week? Village ordinance does restrict construction-related noise activities to 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Those hours would be included in the special provisions for the project contract. And then very likely we could limit it to Monday through Friday, specifically while we're in season, likely. But those two things would be addressed in the special provisions of the contract. Also some questions submitted in advance of tonight's meeting in relation to street lighting. How many street lights would be added and how was this plan developed? And I'll let Mike Simon speak to that issue.
Sure. Okay, street lighting along the 42 corridor is going to be designed the same standards as you see on Church Street and Highway G. These are not minimum standards, they are the standards that the DOT has set, FHWA has set for lighting. There's minimal lighting levels that are needed. The intent is to have a smooth a smooth transition of light from one pole to the other, so it's not just a bright spot right in. But more of a consistent light and it's directed down and towards the roadway and to the sidewalk. It's not intended to be shining back into the homes behind it.
And I understand what you were asking when I gave you the microphone. Why don't you touch on what the existing situation is in terms of that?
The existing street lights, when we first looked at the DOT going over this project, they pointed out the existing lights were never permitted by them to put those in. You don't need to have street lights along a state highway. If you do put them in, you need to meet their standards. So that's why there will be a lot more than there are right now.
You had a comment?
Yeah, well, a lot of people know me. I worked in Egg Harbor for a lot of years. I also drove a school
Can you
bus.
state your name,
Oh,
please?
my name is Kathy Marquez.
Thanks.
I drove bus through Egg Harbor for the last 23 years, and it is just fine the way it is. They blew it when they wanted, they should have did the roundabout when Shipwreck burnt, because then they had enough space, they could have done that. But he would have had to move his business somewhere else, and I understand that probably wasn't a good idea for him, but have they considered not having the entrance to the main street shops off of 42? Because the exit is on Church Street. And I see so many people trying to exit back onto 42 out of there, and that's not safe. So why don't they have the entrance and the exit off of Church Street?
Can't speak for Main Street shops. That's their private property, so I don't know if that's
Okay.
an option that they could.
And are they gonna, if they're gonna close the entrance to the post office off of the highway, can they also do that to the bank? Because the bank can have an entrance off of Orchard.
Definitely something to explore.
Yeah,
Sure.
considered.
Sure.
Then you wouldn't have to have that turn lane if Main Street Shops was entered from Church Street.
Sure.
You wouldn't need the turn lane, which
Sure.
would be great.
Yeah, like I said, I can't speak for them, so I don't know if they've considered that option. Okay, I think I have all the email questions that were asked in advance. Did anything else in the chat come through? Madison, that we haven't covered yet?
Megan,
I
it
did-
looks like I've got some just to me.
Okay, Lynn, go ahead.
So the first one, it looks like is from Randy Grebel, I think. I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name. He says, has there been a study on the additional runoff from all the added cement from the terrace?
Mike, do you want to talk about stormwater management in the port?
Sure, I can touch on it.
Okay.
As part of the contract, part of the permit that we need to get from the DNR for this project, we do have to look at stormwater quality. The amount of runoff that exists now and what there will be after the project. And we have to kind of replace that stormwater quality treatment that's provided by the grass swales on the tap and the terrace and the minimal terrace that's there in the corner. But it's all part of the permitting status. So yes, there is a stormwater study that's done as part of the permitting process.
Okay, and I realize I have one up here that I forgot, and this would be a question for you too, Mike, so since you have the microphone, I'm gonna hit it. What's the thinking behind the turn lane for White Cliff Road? What's the expected use?
Residents.
The turn lane, at what- there's actually 3 turn lanes, as you all know. It starts up the beginning of the left turn lane for G, then you got White Cliff, and then you have Main Street shops. There's not enough room between a left turn lane and Main Street shops and a left turn lane at G to transition down to no turn lane and then come back out. You can't narrow it down, widen out, narrow it down, just not enough distance to meet the DOT standards. And a traffic study was done and traffic, the same warrants that the Main Street shops met are also met at White Cliff Road. And the benefit the White Cliff Road has that I mentioned previously is that when traffic is stopped at Main Street shops, it allows more room for opportunities for traffic north turning left into White Cliff Road to finish that turn.
Okay, Lynn, additional questions that we haven't covered so far that you've received?
Yes, there's one that doesn't state their name, they just say iPhone. They list their main concerns. Number 1, which I think you answered, was light pollution. For example, all the light posts on Church Street, can you eliminate and minimize the number of new lights? Which I think you've already answered. Number 2, increase cement, less absorption into the ground with runoff so close to our bay. And then number 3, I'm concerned about parking. Will there be less than the village now has?
No, there'll be a net gain after construction in parking spaces along the highway. All right, this gentleman here, and then this down.
My name is Lisa Hendricks. I'm a year-round resident. I live in Egg Harbor, but full disclosure, technically it's the town. But obviously I use the village a ton. I too have some concerns, well, quite a bit of concern about the left turn lane. I hear the Main Street shops, I understand the importance of that, but I grocery shop at 2 very special grocery stores here in our community, and we're very lucky to have them. And I'm deeply concerned about not crossing greens and grains, because in theory, there'll be 2 bike lanes, no parking in front anymore, and I understand we have a net gain of parking, but it's farther north. And I think we need to consider that grocery shopping, you're lugging heavier bags. And I did this with a walking boot this fall, and I was grateful I could park in front, and so my situation is temporary, but it got me thinking about people with physical limitations, an older population, parents with children. So I'm crossing 2 lanes, I guess, because I have to probably park maybe in Main Street shops left now. I'm not sure where I go. So that's 5 lanes really, because you're going north and south, 2 bikes, and then the people, and then the turn lane. So I just thought we should also consider that I think grocery stores are a unique situation in terms of what we're all lugging. And we're using it all the time. If you saw the comments, or if you wouldn't mind just handing the mic over. Great.
Hi, my name is Ben Schroeder. My wife and I moved up here last July as a permanent resident. So my question actually, Mike over here, you had mentioned very briefly about catchment basins being needed. Do you have any idea where they would be compared to, construction?
Sure, the catch basins there, right now you have what's just termed as an inlet. The inlet does not have a sump at the bottom of it for particulates to settle out. That's the whole purpose of the catch basin. The particulates settle out, and then the village comes through, probably probably you would only need to do once a year to clean those particulates out, so you still get that stormwater quality action to it. The catch basin will be throughout the entire project, from Church Street at the north is Harps, the South Trail in the south. They'll mostly be on, well, they will pretty much all be on east side of the road because of the sanitary sewer and other utilities that are on the west side of the road. So you have to adjust to those, but to answer your question, is throughout the entire project. They'll just look like a regular inlet from walking down the sidewalk.
So it won't be a big hole in the road.
No,
Hole
no,
in the
no.
road.
No, it's just a deeper in.
Well, Mike, I have a follow-up for Mike on that. So, Mike, do you have any idea what % of the water runoff goes into the catch basins like you just described versus the storm sewer? You know that?
Yeah.
Well, you said there's catch basins throughout the project, right? And those disperse the water underground, right? They don't go in the storm sewer.
No, the catch basins.
Oh,
They're connected to the storm sewer.
Oh, but they drain out before they go to, the water goes to the storm sewer.
Right, it's the idea is for the particles to settle out in the bottom of the catch basin, and as the water settles out, the water flows into the storm sewer. So it's picking up that.
Gotcha.
We have a question right here, I handed the microphone off, and then we'll go to Al, and then we have a question on.
Yeah, just a real quick last question. It sounds like there's a lot of maintenance related to this entire project. And I'm wondering if anyone has calculated or estimated the additional expense burden on the village for maintaining all of these things that we're talking about doing with this project writ large.
I can speak to that.
We have actually put together some estimates in regard to the tree plan specifically, and then we have talked about estimates for other maintenance related items as well. The catch basins and sumps being one of them, and we do have a vendor that we contract with to have those vacuum jobs essentially, or
I'm
cleaned.
not talking about expense. I don't care who does it. We're still gonna pay for it no matter who does it.
Right, we have those estimates and they would be incorporated into our annual budget. It is something we're thinking about, yes. I believe we did get a quote for the cleaning the catch basin specifically before we made that change in the plan. Sure.
And then I'm gonna take the one on the screen there. Or the, and Al has one. Oh, Al, if you wanna just hand it to Al there, I said we'd go to him next.
Good evening, I'm Al Woolman. My wife and I own Grumpy's Ice Cream, which is down next to Casey's. In a prior longtime occupation, I was in traffic law enforcement. There's a couple of points that I cannot quite understand here. There is congestion on some weekends in the summer. Highway G and by Shipwreck is obviously one of them, but there's also a second point. There is no accident severity index in the village from numerous accidents or close calls that this project is solving. I can understand the project. One of the concerns I have, we have the traffic lane, we have the bike lane, which is not marked. All that is a passing on the right lane. That's not a bike lane unless you mark it and you have bicycles marked on the pavement. Then it'll look pretty busy. However, also limiting the parking down by Green to Green, all you're going to do is speed up the traffic flow with less hassle to get through town or wherever you want to go. So I think some of that could be modified. We don't want to make it ease of getting through here. Maybe a little bit less complicated, but I don't think speed and increasing the velocity that people be able to get through town is a big thing that has to be solved. And by making it look sleek and everything else, making it easy to get by faster, I don't think is the problem that it seems to be like one of the things, if it is a problem that you want to solve. And the congestion is there somewhat. You come through downtown, You got the people turning to the boat going down G, so what? You didn't like every damn weekend, every day it's like that. And the people coming to town, you talk about Church Street probably, which looks like I-43, nobody knows where that is, outside of the people sitting right here. Nobody knows where that is. And the ones that come to town and have become aware of it, it's just a good one to whip down the street and get on the highway E and go north. That's my observation of it. Thank you.
I just do want to speak to one point about the bike that Al had made. We did go through our comprehensive planning process back in 2019. We specifically asked a question about the bike lanes with the most support being to reroute the bicycle traffic off of the highway through Church Street. So just wanted to point that out. Kathy, go ahead.
Yeah, can I just add on to the bike lanes? I do a lot of.
Yeah, go ahead.
Through traffic, if you're riding on 42, going through Egg Harbor, not to stop. It's a really good idea to use Church Street for a bike lane, a formal bike path. That's going to be marked, it's going to be signed. Okay, the bike traffic within the village is really going to be minimal. If you are a bike that wants to come into the village, you can still go on Church Street, then come back in on Market Street. Oops, my bed alarm. So if you want to go to some of the shops, you're coming into town from 42, and there's really not a lot of bike traffic on 42. It's on T, it's on G. But you can still get into the heart of the village on Orchard Street and Market Street. So all of those factors came into play for us to reroute that formal bike lane on Church Street. Wait, was there?
Yeah, kind of right there, and then you have a different question. Yeah.
I now more questions are building. But to the bike thing, there are tons of people that ride bike down 42. All those J1 visas, they ride down the sidewalks. And I don't know where they're gonna ride when this project is completed, but I have a bit of an issue of the idea that bike traffic should go down Church Street when we're hoping people will come on bikes to our businesses. So if I think you're maybe talking about people who are riding bike for exercise, but people that are using bike as transportation to get to wherever they want to go, they need to be able to get onto the highway somehow and get to the businesses along the highway.
Didn't you say they could ride the bike?
Yeah, they can, but it's not marked, and I don't know how safe it is with harbors opening as it is right now.
Yeah, just one, and thank you for that clarification. Just one more point. If we had the bike lanes, we're adding 2 feet to the width of the road. So that's the trade-off.
So 2 other quick comments. When we're talking about maintenance of all the new street additions, who will be cutting the grass on the in the taps, in the terraces?
The village has not made a final determination on the material that will be included in those terraces. There has been a lot of consideration and discussion around maybe going with the no-mow fescue or micro clover, so that it does not have to be cut as much. If it would be, regular turf grass, the current property owners maintain the grass along the highway. So that would be the same expectation, but we are highly considering putting in a material there that would not have to be mowed.
And then one other, I just want to speak more to what Jim said about the center of town. In the majority of the core, you have a 10-foot sidewalk, 5-foot terrace, 5-foot sidewalk. But when you get down into that core, I don't know what those widths are, but it looks to me like there's 20 feet of solid concrete. As you go in front of Don and Polly's, the sidewalk terrace looks literally like it's 20 feet wide. And yeah, if you watch the video. And also, I also agree that the front of Harborview Park looks sad. we really should make that look like the center of town and have much less concrete and much more green or benches or something. So that it just doesn't look like a concrete jungle.
All right, yeah, go ahead.
My name is Liz Hack. I also, like my friend Lisa, live in the town, but I'm in the village every day. I'm addressing that same corner. First of all, on 3 different occasions this summer, I saw somebody trip over that big median that's in the middle of the intersection there. It's not safe there. People that are going to either shipwrecked or mezzanine or coming around to go wherever they're going, they drop people off on the back of shipwrecked and in front of mezzanine because there's no place for anybody to park. So you can't get through there anyway. Then you have people trying to get across the crosswalk. The whole corner is a disaster and it doesn't look nice. And I feel like putting lights there is not a good idea either, because that's one of the few places that you can have a beautiful view and see the sunset. And you're gonna put those lights there and it's just gonna make it even worse. And I don't know what's gonna happen when Shipwreck puts their beer garden there. More congestion, it's just a terrible area. So I don't know, more plantings or, maybe trying to deter people away from using that as a drop-off area. It's just not safe. So. Thank you.
Okay, we have a comment from Lynn Rowe online, and the great team is prepared to discuss that. Lynn, if you are still on with us, I believe they need clarification from you, however.
So it disappeared. Sorry, I didn't see the whole message.
Yeah.
Or the whole question.
Are you talking to me, Megan?
Oh, Lynn Rowe.
Oh, okay.
Her comment is, could the crosswalk be routed through the park as a nice path and cross behind the traffic at the Marina Road? I think she means Dock Road. A barrier could be used to route people to the path and keep them from crossing at GM42. It would improve safety and be a more enjoyable walk through the park.
So if Lynn is still on the line, maybe a clarification as to which crosswalk she's referencing. Is she referencing the one on the west side of Highway 42 as it crosses County G into the park from Shipwreck, maybe?
Doesn't look like she's still a participant, so we'll just have to maybe follow up separately on that.
Tricky to answer that, not knowing necessarily which crosswalk she's referencing.
I think she may be referring to the if she's referring to the crosswalk that I mentioned, maybe a little bit harder to preserve, the one on the south end of White Cliff that currently exists, but is shown as removed in one of the plans. If I'm understanding it, that she's suggesting potentially to shift that further south to sort of go directly through the middle of the, what I would essentially call a double intersection. And bring people directly from a crosswalk into the middle of the park. That was not analyzed by us. If I'm understanding that suggestion. Certainly we can think more about that, but that'd be a complicated idea to consider.
Judy Ortiz,
Just one more thing, Megan. I think also if that is the recommendation at the curve itself, if that is in the center of where you are curving, that would be very tricky to try to accomplish.
Sure. Judy Ortiz, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate what Jim said about the center of town. And I think I didn't like all the concrete, just too much concrete. Just doesn't make it look quaint and villagey. And also I want to reiterate what Kathy Nava said about eliminating the parking and putting in the turn lanes. The traffic studies were done in July and August. The rest of the year, we need those parking spots. We don't need turn lanes. And the turn lanes are going to just get the traffic through faster, which I think is not necessarily what we want to do.
Thanks, Judy. Additional comment in the chat from James Lopat. Who will be responsible for snow removal on sidewalks on north and south ends, city or property owners? The village currently takes care of our snow removal for all of our sidewalks. That would be the same case for north and south. If you've been around this winter, you may have seen our new piece of equipment, which was purchased in order to remove snow more efficiently. So, any additional comments from anyone in the room?
I don't need them. I want to agree with Kathy's comments about the parking. I was alarmed when we saw the video and there's this long strip of yellow. As somebody who became aware of mobility.
No, I've got Zoom on, but this is.
If you could just mute, yep. Go ahead.
Recently became aware of mobility parking. I was surprised this fall, I didn't see a handicap spot near mezzanine or the park. I tried to go to the farmer's market once and that climb up, that's not being addressed now. But we need parking downtown. You need parking to go into Kathy's or to the restaurants. And we know that Door County has this graying population. God knows how many of our visitors are graying. I'd like to see that taken into consideration so that we are a more walkable destination. Not 2 blocks to get to a store, not that kind of walkable. But I'm with you.
All right, any additional comments? All right, Ken has an additional comment and then I think we'll, question.
I just have a question. I wonder if Don can elaborate on this. Been a number of questions and comments where people feel like that turn lane, not the turn lane, but the through lane would increase traffic speeds. Is that the case in your opinion? Can you comment on that?
Sure. So generally, and I can only speak from a planning perspective on this issue, when it comes to roadway engineering and how it affects traffic, I do have to prevent myself from sharing my personal opinion on this issue. It's rather how, what I understand is best practices in roadway design, and I can defer to engineers to answer the question in terms of traffic speeds directly. In general, roadway widening, the widening of travel lanes and additional space on open space is what we understand to be one of the bigger contributors to increased vehicle speeds, narrowing being a best practice for traffic calming, as well as chicanes and turning movements and anything that is an obstruction being really good best practices for traffic calming. In terms of whether a 12-foot travel lane plus a 4-foot shy distance to the gutter would increase travel speeds compared to what currently exists, which is a 12-foot travel lane and a 4-foot shy distance to parking, it's the same width. So there's no change in the width of the travel lane. So the only idea that additional speeds would come from the inclusion of a turn lane would be the idea that people feel comfortable crossing over lane lines, or that is perceived as a wider roadway. But those lane lines exist. We acknowledge that may still be a concern, which is why we did recommend in considering vertical barriers in the form of bollards or in the form of a curved median, if it's possible, at that refuge to provide something that's actually an obstruction in the roadway. We understand that the DOT may have issues with that, and those that maybe need to be explored, but that's typically what we would recommend to counteract that issue. So while there's a potential speed worsening problem, there are solutions to that speed worsening problem that we are very familiar with implementing in projects like this, versus the congestion problem, which if it's not addressed by the turn lane, there are very few alternatives to address the congestion issue at present. So we're talking about trading a solvable problem for a less solvable problem. And the solvable problem is the speed and the pedestrian safety. The less solvable problem is the congestion. There are fewer solutions for the congestion, others of which have been explored by the village. We were not asked to explore alternative roadway design solutions as planners. That would be an engineering problem and take much longer than we've had time to address in this project. You want to add anything?
Okay, any additional closing comments or questions? Otherwise, I think we will wrap up.
Megan, there's another chat.
Go ahead, Lynn.
It's from Cambria. She says to the urban planners, how do you do traffic studies to base your findings off of? Do you take a peak season study and an off-peak season study? Are we wrong to be moving forward with a study that was done during our peak season?
Mike, as the engineer, you wanna answer that first and then Peter for the additional comment? Oh, go ahead.
The original traffic study done for the project in G42 was done in direction of DOT. They told us exactly when we had to do our traffic counts, what time of year. They wanted it done on a Thursday, Friday, and Saturday in July and August. I mean, at that time, the village was asking the question, was turn lanes need to be there? Can we eliminate them to narrow up the road? They said, we have to do a study at that time. So gotta keep in mind this whole thing, this is a state trunk highway. It's on the national highway system. It's not the village's road. So we're working in coordination with them. So there's a little give and take you have to do, but they're the ones who establish when the warrants and studies will be done.
Thank you.
Other people? So we are the planners. Thank you, Mike, for answering that. We did not perform a traffic study as part of this, but we were lucky enough to have that information available to us as part of the overall study for the project, from the project engineers. We are also lucky enough at Grave to have our own traffic engineers on staff, even though that wasn't what we were to necessarily analyze. It was to analyze urban design best practices and general safety. But what, through that analysis and understanding what the traffic count said, it was warranted for the turn lane and for the travel lanes to be the way they are. The only other thing I want to mention about speeds, if I could quickly too, is the idea of maybe abrupt changes in speed to roadway design. Left turn lanes, instead of reflecting or thinking about it as calming, they can have an effect to reduce kind of those abrupt changes of slamming on your brakes waiting for somebody to turn, or abrupt increases in speed if you're waiting for, once somebody has passed you by, as you get through the through lane. So those are just.
Can you clarify that word warrants? Because my understanding is it does not mean required. It simply means it would be something that would be reasonable to consider. Is that right?
I would have to defer to Mike to define what the word warrants
I don't think
through
it's
wisdom.
required.
Warrant analysis, it's a longer answer, but when we first started meeting with the DOT, we made the point, and they agreed with it, that the village is spending a lot of money on this project, and whenever they install now, they want it to be not affected when the DOT reconstructs it sometime in the future. So we're designing concurrent standards. Concurrent standards, they list warrants for turn lanes, warrants for signals, and you have to do it. The DOT is just going to come in and know research. The village doesn't have to do anything. We're trying to make improvements, and we're trying to make improvements that meet the DOT standards, which is what we're doing.
I just think people should know that it doesn't mean it's required. We don't have to do those.
Correct. It's like the signals that warrant at G and 42, those are warranted. The decisions have been made not to install them.
Like if they're building a new road, they're building a brand.
Ken asked if the DOT was completely reconstructing the road, what that would mean for the turn lanes.
The typical design standards, they would go through and look at the turning movements at key intersections and look at their warrants and make improvements as they can.
All right, well, I want to thank everybody for coming and bearing with us through our meeting tonight. And feel free to take a look at the boards provided by Grave here and put your stickers as appropriate. Those joining us virtually, thanks so much. Additional comments can be submitted after tonight's meeting to assistant@elizabethharbor.org. Thanks, everyone, and we are wrapped up. Have a good night.